My son stopped the car in the middle of the desert just before noon. When I refused to sign the documents, he threw my bag onto the gravel, dropped 2 bottles of water at my feet, and laughed. "If you won't sign, find your own way home." My daughter-in-law sat silently in the passenger seat, refusing to meet my eyes. At 69, I stood alone on Highway 40, watching their SUV vanish into the scorching heat. They believed an old retired principal would panic and surrender. What they never imagined was that I had spent 3 months preparing for their betrayal. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge Stories. Before we dive in, leave a comment. Have you ever discovered something about someone you trusted that completely changed how you saw them? I read every comment, and your experiences help others feel less alone. Just a note, some details are fictionalized to highlight the lesson. What matters most is the message it carries. At 69, I sat alone in my Pasadena kitchen, before dawn reading my dead wife's instructions for the 7th time that year, unaware this would be the last morning I'd trust my only son. The coffee maker hissed in the darkness. I reached for Joyce's blue ceramic mug, the one with the chipped handle she'd refused to replace for 20 years, and poured carefully. 5 years she'd been gone. 5 years of this ritual in the kitchen we'd remodeled together back when my knees still cooperated and she still laughed at my jokes. I opened the drawer beside the sink. The quarter-folded paper sat where I always kept it, creased soft from handling. Joyce's handwriting hadn't faded, precise cursive in blue ink. Things you need to remember when I'm gone. 7 items. 7 instructions from a woman who'd built a $42 million construction empire beside me, 1 lumber order and 1 honest invoice at a time. I unfolded it. Number 1. Pay Vernon first always. Vernon Hewitt, my operations manager for 22 years. Numbers 2 through 6, practical wisdom about property, legal structures. The business she called our 3rd child. Number 7 stopped me like it always did. Don't let love blind you to the truth. I folded the paper and slipped it into my shirt pocket. Joyce had written this 3 weeks before the cancer took her. 3 weeks when she knew things I didn't, saw patterns I'd missed. She'd always been sharper, better with numbers, better with people, better at seeing what someone was hiding behind their smile. I whispered to the empty chair across from me. 5 years, Joyce. Still feels like 5 minutes. The coffee tasted like every morning since she left, necessary, not comforting. I stood at the window watching streetlights flicker against the morning mist, thinking about the anniversary trip Boyd had planned. Our 47th wedding anniversary would have been today. Joyce rested at Desert Memorial Park in Barstow, 3 hours east through the Mojave. Boyd had suggested we drive out together, visit her grave. I'd thought it was a kind gesture, but Joyce's number 7 whispered in my pocket. The doorbell shattered the quiet. Too early, too eager, too calculated. 5:45 a.m. Boyd was 20 minutes early. My son, who'd been habitually late his entire adult life, late to family dinners, late to business meetings, late to his own mother's funeral. But today, he'd arrived before sunrise. I opened the door. Boyd Garrison stood on my porch at 41 years old, dressed in pressed khakis and a polo shirt. His smile was too wide, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Dad," he said, voice bright. "Ready for today?" The gray sedan in my driveway caught my attention, not his usual black BMW. "Car trouble?" I asked. Boyd's smile flickered. "BMW's in the shop. Routine maintenance." I walked past him toward the driveway. The morning air carried jasmine from the neighbor's fence and the faint petroleum tang of the nearby freeway. The sedan was a late-model Nissan Altima gray and anonymous. I circled to the rear bumper. Enterprise Rent-A-Car. The small sticker sat in the lower corner of the back windshield. 40 years reading blueprints and job sites had taught me that details matter. Enterprise doing BMW maintenance now. I kept my voice neutral. "Loaner car," Boyd said quickly. "Dealer program." I glanced through the rear window. A black leather briefcase sat on the back seat, partially covered by a jacket. The jacket had slipped just enough to reveal two words embossed in gold lettering. Legal documents. My son, who'd called 3 weeks ago, suggesting this trip. My son, who'd left the family business 8 years ago to marry Marlene, a financial analyst. My son, who'd been distant, polite, dutiful, in the carefully measured way of someone fulfilling obligations rather than maintaining relationships. This son had rented a car instead of using his own, had arrived 20 minutes early instead of 20 minutes late, had brought a briefcase to visit his mother's grave. A lifetime in construction teaches you to read people, the ones who smile while reaching for your wallet, the ones who use family words while planning betrayal. Boyd opened the passenger door, his smile returning wider now. Ready, Dad. Today I want to hear all about the first day you met Mom. You never tell that story anymore. He hadn't asked about that story once in 5 years. Not at holidays, not at family dinners, not during the brief, uncomfortable phone calls every few months. But today, on our anniversary with a rental car and legal documents hidden under a jacket, my son wanted to talk about Joyce. I touched the folded paper in my shirt pocket. Joyce's number 7 pressed against my ribs like a warning. Don't let love blind you to the truth. I looked at my son's too bright smile, at the briefcase he thought I hadn't noticed at the rental car, chosen to avoid tracking. And I climbed into the passenger seat anyway, because I'd known for 3 months exactly what Boyd was planning. I'd hired investigators, reviewed documents, traced money. I knew about the power of attorney paperwork in that briefcase, about the plan to have me declared incompetent, about the scheme he'd built with his wife Marlene to liquidate everything Joyce and I had built. I knew, but Boyd didn't know I knew, and that made all the difference. The engine started. Boyd pulled onto the street, still smiling that rehearsed smile. The briefcase shifted in the back seat as we turned toward the freeway. So, Dad, Boyd said, voice warm with false nostalgia, tell me about the day you met Mom. I want to hear everything. I settled into the passenger seat and began the story he'd never cared about before, watching his hands on the steering wheel, counting the miles, until he'd show me what he'd really brought me out here to see. Joyce's list rustled against my chest with every breath. 3 hours to Barstow. 3 hours until my son discovered that the father he thought was a foolish old man had been 3 months ahead of him all along. The rental car smelled wrong, too clean, too neutral, scrubbed of any history. And as we merged onto the I-10 East with the sun breaking over Los Angeles, I understood my son had chosen a vehicle with no digital trail. Boyd adjusted the air conditioning, cleared his throat, smiled that rehearsed smile. So, Dad, tell me about the day you bought the first Pasadena branch. Mom always said that was when everything changed. I turned my head slightly, watching his profile against the morning light flooding through the windshield. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel index, middle ring, pinky repeat. The same nervous rhythm from childhood, the same tell before every exam he hadn't studied for every lie he'd practiced in the mirror. Your mother never talked about business at home, Boyd, I said quietly. She talked about people. He blinked twice, caught. Right. Yeah, I meant the people, the employees, how you built the team. I let the silence sit between us for a moment, watching the suburbs thin into industrial parks, then scrub brush. Vernon was the first hire, 2001. He was working demo for a competitor, showed up on a job site in Fontana to tear down a warehouse we'd just framed. I offered him triple to switch sides. Triple, Boyd repeated, eyes not quite focusing on the road. That's good business. That's recognizing value when you see it. I kept my voice even, conversational. Your mother taught me that. She could look at a balance sheet and tell you which numbers mattered and which ones were just noise. Boyd nodded, fingers still tapping. She was smart. She was. The highway stretched ahead, empty and straight. We passed Pomona, then the turnoff for Ontario. The city gave way completely now, nothing but beige hills and the occasional cluster of industrial buildings squatting in the heat. Boyd's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every 30 seconds. No one was following us. No one knew we were here, exactly as he'd planned. "Tell me about the early days," Boyd said, voice artificially bright again. "When you and Mom were just starting out. What was Pasadena like back then?" I'd lived in Pasadena for 43 years. Boyd had grown up there, gone to school, there learned to drive on those streets. He'd never once asked what the city was like before he was born. "Different," I said. "Cheaper. We bought the house for $82,000 in 1980. 3 bedrooms needed work. Your mother picked the paint colors while I replumbed the bathrooms." "82,000, Boyd said. "That's incredible. How many times had I watched those fingers tap before a lie?" We crossed into San Bernardino County. The scrub brush grew sparse, the earth turning from brown to bleached tan. Heat shimmered off the asphalt ahead, making the horizon waver. Boyd's phone sat face up in the cup holder screen dark. Until it wasn't. The screen lit up. "Marlene." The name glowed for 3 seconds before Boyd snatched the phone, flipped it face down. His fingers went still on the wheel. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. Boyd glanced at me. I let my eyes drift closed, settling my head against the window, breathing slow and steady. The posture of an old man dozing on a long drive, lulled by highway rhythm and morning warmth. I heard him exhale. Heard the soft tap as he pressed the Bluetooth button on the steering wheel. "Yeah," Boyd whispered. Marlene Garrison's voice filled the car, sharp and urgent through the speakers. I'd met her exactly 7 times in 8 years of marriage to my son, polished professional, 38 years old, with the kind of smile that calculated profit margins while shaking your hand. "You have to make him sign before you come back," Marlene said. No greeting, no warmth. "Kingsley is calling every single day." "I know," Boyd said, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm working on it. Working on it isn't good enough. We owe him $800,000. End of month, Boyd. That's 18 days. $800,000. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, every muscle relaxed. "He keeps asking about the paperwork," Boyd said. "Who cares what he asks?" Marlene's voice could have cut glass. "The POA gives us the right to sign on his behalf. We don't need his permission. We need his signature on the updated documents, so everything looks clean. What if he asks questions? He won't. He's 70 years old and still mourning his dead wife. He doesn't understand how any of this works. Just get him emotional at the cemetery, hand him the papers, tell him it's routine estate planning." Boyd's fingers found the wheel again. Tap, tap, tap. "And if he refuses, he won't refuse. You're his son. He trusts you." A pause. Static crackle through the speakers. "He doesn't need to know the details. Just get his signature on the updated documents. Once we have that, we can execute the warehouse sale, clear the Kingsley debt, and restructure everything before he even knows what happened." "Okay," Boyd said. "Okay, I'll call you after." "Don't call, text." And Boyd, "What?" "Make sure he signs every page. Kingsley won't accept anything incomplete." The line went dead. Boyd sat rigid for 10 seconds, then glanced at me again. I kept my eyes closed, kept my breathing even. He exhaled slowly and turned the music up, soft jazz meant to soothe, meant to disguise what I'd just heard. I opened my eyes, staring straight ahead at the horizon, where nothing existed but sand and blistering heat. The dashboard thermometer read 94 degrees and climbing. Outside, the desert stretched endless and indifferent. I'd known this was coming for 3 months. Every phone call Clyde recorded, every document Vernon flagged, every late-night strategy session with Martin Ashford in his San Marino office. I'd known about the Kingsley debt, about the forged warehouse lease, about the POA paperwork Boyd carried in that briefcase. But knowing and hearing are different species of pain. Knowing is abstract numbers on paper, legal theories, hypothetical betrayals. Hearing my son's voice agree to it. Hearing my daughter-in-law orchestrate it with surgical precision. Hearing them discuss me like I was already dead and buried next to Joyce that carved something out of my chest that 3 months of investigation hadn't touched. The green highway sign appeared ahead, Desert Memorial Park, 2 miles. Boyd's fingers went still on the wheel. I closed my eyes again, let him think I was sleeping. Let him believe his father was a foolish old man who trusted his only son. 2 miles until he'd ask me to sign. 2 miles until I'd show him exactly how foolish I wasn't. The cemetery entrance appeared like a mirage through the heat. Shimmer low shrubs, white sand faded, plastic flowers baking in 94-degree sun, and Boyd pulled to the shoulder 50 feet before the gates. He didn't shift into park. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the wrought iron arch that marked Desert Memorial Park. "Before we go in," Boyd said, reaching for the black leather briefcase, "I need you to sign something." I watched him extract a thick stack of documents clipped together. Professional, expensive-looking paperwork. "What is it?" I asked. "Just a routine POA update." He slid the stack across the console. "Power of attorney. Allows me to manage the properties more flexibly. Estate planning. Vernon mentioned you should have this in place." Vernon had mentioned no such thing. Vernon Hewitt, who'd flagged the first anomaly 3 months ago, who'd been helping me document every irregularity since April. I took the papers. Page 1 looked standard legal boilerplate, my name spelled correctly. Page 2, standard language about medical decisions. Page 3 stopped me cold. Absolute unrestricted power of attorney. Rights to sell real estate without notice, transfer shares without consent. Withdraw cash without limits. The kind that makes a man invisible in his own financial life. I looked at my son. "The warehouse lease agreement," I said quietly. "Back in January, the Fontana property. My signature is on it, but I never signed it." Boyd's fingers found the steering wheel. Tap, tap, tap. 3 seconds of silence. Only the engine's idle and dry wind scraping sand against the doors. "You shouldn't be handling finances anymore, Dad." Boyd's voice had lost its warmth. "You're getting old. You forget things. I'm just protecting you." "I don't forget," I said. "I remember every document I sign. 40 years in business teaches you that. And I never signed that warehouse lease." "You did. In January. We discussed it. We discussed the option. We never discussed execution, but somehow my signature appeared anyway." I tapped the POA papers. "This is what you used, isn't it? You forged my name in January to test whether anyone was watching. When nobody challenged it, you decided to go bigger." Boyd stared at the cemetery gates. Sweat ran down his temple despite the air conditioning. "How does a man forge his own father's name on legal documents and still sleep at night?" "Sign the papers, Dad," Boyd said, voice flat. "Sign them and we'll go see Mom's grave." I folded the documents and placed them on the dashboard. "No." Boyd's jaw tightened. His fingers went still. For a moment I thought he might drive away, leave me in the desert heat. Instead, he opened his door. "Fine, let's get this over with." The heat hit like a physical thing, dry, invasive baking moisture from skin before you notice. The cemetery stretched before us, maybe 200 graves scattered across bleached earth. No grass, no trees, just white sand studded with gray and pink granite headstones. Joyce's was in the 3rd row. Simple gray granite with her name, her dates, and the inscription she'd chosen. She built things that last. I knelt on the sand, feeling heat seep through my pants, burning my knees. The stone was warm to touch. I'd brought nothing, no flowers, no offerings. Just myself and the weight of knowing what our son had become. 5 years, I whispered. 5 years, and I still don't know how to do this without you. Boyd stood behind me, not kneeling. I heard his phone buzz, heard him typing, heard him sigh. I placed my palm against Joyce's name, tracing the engraved letters. She'd built things that last. The business, the house, our life together. The son standing behind me, checking his phone while his mother's bones rested 6 feet below. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 2. The sun climbed higher. "Are you done yet, Dad?" Boyd's voice carried pure exasperation. "It's burning up out here." I looked at the inscription. She built things that last. then back at my son Joyce's son. The woman who'd loved him unconditionally, who'd sat up with him through colic and heartbreak, who'd mortgaged our house twice so he'd have something to inherit. Joyce's son. The woman who built everything with love. And this is what she built. What would your mother say? I asked quietly, if she saw what you're doing. Boyd shoved his phone into his pocket. Something flickered across his face, not guilt, not shame, but irritation, at being delayed, at being questioned, at having to stand in 100-degree heat pretending to mourn. Mom is dead, Dad. 4 words. Flat. Final. Devoid of grief or reverence or basic human decency. He turned toward the car, footsteps crunching on sand, leaving me kneeling beside the woman who had loved him unconditionally for 41 years. I stayed another minute, palm pressed against warm granite, reading her inscription one more time. She built things that last, but some things don't last. Some things rot from the inside, no matter how carefully you build them, no matter how much love you pour into the foundation. I stood slowly, knees protesting, and turned toward the rental car where my son sat in the driver's seat. Engine running, air conditioning, blasting eyes on his phone instead of his mother's grave. The unsigned POA papers sat on the dashboard like a gauntlet thrown. I climbed into the passenger seat. Boyd didn't look at me. "Let's go," he said. The argument that had been simmering since the cemetery gates was about to explode in the suffocating heat of that rental car. Boyd pulled onto the highway, accelerating hard. The cemetery disappeared in the rearview mirror. He drove in silence for 2 miles, jaw-clenched, fingers tight on the wheel. Then he pulled onto a dirt access road I hadn't noticed, unmarked, barely visible, leading away from the highway into nothing but sand and scrub brush. "Where are we going?" I asked. Boyd didn't answer. He drove another 1/4 mile until the highway disappeared behind us, until we were surrounded by nothing but desert stretching to the horizon in every direction. Then he stopped the car, shifted into park, turned to face me, and I saw in his eyes that the performance was over. The car swerved violently as we pulled back onto Highway 40, and I knew the pretense was over. Boyd's hands were shaking on the wheel, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. He accelerated too fast, gravel spraying from the tires. The speedometer climbed past 70, past 80. The desert blurred outside my window, nothing but sand and scrub brush and heat shimmer, making the horizon waver like water. The air conditioning blasted cold air between us, but the temperature inside the car had nothing to do with thermostats. "You let cash sit idle," Boyd said, voice tight. "You let millions just sit there while I'm drowning." I kept my eyes forward. "Tell me about Dexter Kingsley." The car jerked. Boyd's foot slipped on the accelerator. "What?" "Dexter Kingsley," I repeated calmly. "Nevada real estate, $800,000. Boyd's knuckles went white on the wheel. The color drained from his face. For 3 seconds, the only sound was the engine and the hum of tires on asphalt. "How long have you known?" His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't answer. In my mind, since April 16th. 3 months. Every phone call recorded, every document flagged, every move you made I watched. But today I need you to finish what you started. Boyd's phone sat mounted on the dashboard. I could see the screen from my angle. Offline maps downloaded, bright blue route, highlighted no cell service indicators. He'd planned this drive, this exact stretch of highway where coverage dies. "You don't understand anything about money," Boyd said, voice rising. "You sit on properties worth millions and you won't leverage them. You won't borrow against them. You just let them sit there like you're some kind of what?" I asked quietly. "Some kind of Depression-era hoarder who doesn't understand how modern finance works." The speedometer hit 85. The desert stretched endless on both sides. "Marlene and I, Boyd continued, words tumbling faster now. "We had a plan. Real estate development. Kingsley was going to partner with us. We put down earnest money." "My earnest money," I said. "You weren't using it. The warehouse lease freed up capital we needed." "The warehouse lease I never signed." "You would have signed it if you understood the opportunity." I watched my son's face contort with rationalization, with desperate belief in his own narrative. This was a man who'd convinced himself that theft was actually prudent financial planning. How long does it take to plan your father's death in the desert? A day, a week, 3 months? The deal fell through, Boyd said, voice quieter now. Kingsley wants his money back. End of month. If we don't pay, you'll lose everything, I finished. We'll lose everything. I let that sit between us. The pronoun he'd chosen. We. As if his gambling on Nevada real estate with stolen funds had somehow bound our fates together. The car slowed. Boyd's eyes scanned the roadside, searching for something specific. Mile marker 57 appeared ahead. Boyd yanked the steering wheel right. Gravel crunched under the tires as we pulled onto the shoulder. He shifted into park, but left the engine running. Get out, he said. I looked at him. At my son. At the boy Joyce had held in the hospital 41 years ago, the boy we'd taught to ride a bike and tie his shoes and treat people with basic human decency. Boyd, get out of the car, Dad. His voice was ice, colder than I'd ever heard it. Colder than the air conditioning blasting between us. I opened the door. The heat hit me like walking into a furnace dry, suffocating 108 degrees of Mojave summer at 11 a.m. Under my feet, the gravel radiated stored heat. Boyd popped the trunk, walked around, pulled out my small overnight bag, and threw it onto the dirt shoulder. Then he reached into the back seat and extracted 2 plastic water bottles, the cheap kind from gas stations, 99 cents each, with condensation already evaporating in the heat. He tossed them at my feet like afterthoughts. From his wallet he pulled a single $5 bill, held it out. When you're ready to sign, Boyd said, call me. I took the bill, looked at the water bottles on the ground. At the gas station, price stickers still visible on the plastic. You bought these before we left Pasadena, I said quietly. This morning, before you picked me up. Boyd's jaw worked. He didn't deny it. I slid the $5 into my pocket. How long have you been planning this exact moment, Boyd? How many times did you drive this route? Did you time it? Did you check the weather forecast? Did you calculate how long a 69-year-old man could survive in this heat with 2 bottles of water? Sign the papers, Boyd said, and I'll turn around. Refuse and you can walk to Barstow. 19 miles. Cell service picks up around mile 12. You'll figure it out. He climbed back into the car, shifted into drive. I stood on that burning gravel and watched my son look at me through the passenger window. Not with guilt, not with fear, but with cold calculation. The look of a man who'd run the numbers and decided his father's life was worth less than clearing a debt. The rental car pulled away, accelerated, disappeared into heat shimmer. I picked up the water bottles. Both were already warm to the touch. I picked up my overnight bag. The gravel burned through my shoes. This is a place where I could die. 69 years old, 108 degrees, 2 bottles of water. And my son knew it. The highway stretched before me empty, shimmering, endless. To my left, scrub brush and sand. To my right, more of the same. Behind me, nothing but the direction Boyd had driven. Ahead, Barstow, 19 miles. I turned my face toward that distant city and began to walk, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I knew Clyde Barton's Peterbilt semi was positioned exactly 400 meters behind me, camera running, recording every second of my son's felony, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 mile at a time. 3 miles ahead, I would hear the deep rumble of an 18-wheeler's engine. I'd been walking for maybe an hour when the first real fear arrived. Not the abstract knowledge that I could die out here, but the physical certainty of it in my cracked lips, my pounding heart, the way my vision had started to narrow at the edges. 1 foot in front of the other. The asphalt shimmered ahead, endless and cruel. My shirt was soaked through with sweat that evaporated almost immediately in the desert air. The first water bottle was half empty. I'd been careful with its small sips every 100 yards, but the heat stole moisture faster than I could replace it. My lips had cracked. I could taste blood when I ran my tongue across them. 69 years old, heart pounding against my ribs like something trying to escape. vision starting to tunnel peripheral darkness creeping in at the edges, the way it does when blood pressure drops or the brain starts rationing oxygen. But my mind stayed strangely calm, almost detached, counting steps, calculating distances. Every 100 yards I thought the same thing. This is what my son sentenced me to. This is evidence. This is the price of proof. The heat wasn't metaphorical. It wasn't some poetic description of emotional suffering. It was a physical weight pressing down on my skull, baking thought, slow, making each step require conscious decision. Left foot, right foot. Don't stop. The desert stretched infinite on both sides. Scrub brush, sand. No shade, no shelter. Nothing but bleached earth and sky so blue it hurt to look at. I checked my watch. 11:32. I'd been walking 45 minutes. 3 miles, maybe. Perhaps less. Hard to judge when every step feels like wading through concrete. The second water bottle sat in my bag, still sealed. I needed to pace it. 19 miles to Barstow. Even if I rationed perfectly, 2 bottles wouldn't be enough. The math was simple and unforgiving. But I wasn't walking 19 miles. I was walking 3. The rumble of an 18-wheeler's engine cut through the silence like an answer to a prayer I hadn't spoken aloud. I turned. The massive Peterbilt semi appeared through the heat shimmer, growing larger as it approached. Red cab. Chrome grille catching sunlight. The kind of rig that hauls cross-country thousands of miles on identical highways. It slowed. Air brakes hissed. The truck pulled onto the shoulder maybe 50 feet ahead of me and stopped. The driver's door opened. A man climbed down from the cab, weathered mid-50s with the kind of face that comes from too many years on the road. Work boots hit the gravel. He wore jeans and a faded gray t-shirt, sunglasses hanging from his collar. "Mr. Garrison," he said, walking toward me. "Clyde Barton. I've been working for you for 3 months." I stopped walking. My legs were shaking. The relief hit me like a physical thing, not just rescue, but vindication. Proof, witness, everything I'd planned for since April. "Does my son know you?" My voice came out raspy, throat raw from heat and exertion. Clyde Barton, 54, and weathered like highway asphalt, shook his head. "He thinks I'm just a regular trucker. I faked a breakdown twice along this route over the last 3 months, just so he'd get used to seeing my truck around without getting suspicious." He handed me a water bottle, ice-cold condensation beating on the plastic. I drank half of it in 3 swallows. The cold hurt going down. "Former LAPD," Clyde continued. 15 years detective, 10 years private. Martin Ashford hired me in April. Said you needed surveillance that wouldn't spook your target. He gestured toward the truck. "Come on, air conditioning, and I need to show you something." I followed him to this cab. The interior was immaculate black coffee and the cup holder laptop, mounted on the dash, everything organized with military precision. The air conditioning blasted cold enough to make me shiver after the desert heat. Clyde settled into the driver's seat and opened the laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard. A video player appeared on screen. "Wide-angle camera," he said, pointing to the truck's grille. "Concealed in the chrome. Captured everything at mile marker 57. He pressed play. The footage was crystal clear. Boyd's rental car pulling to the shoulder. The passenger door opening. Me stepping out. Boyd throwing my bag onto the dirt. The 2 water bottles tossed like garbage. The $5 bill held out like an insult. Boyd's mouth moving. "When you're ready to sign, call me." The car pulling away. Me standing alone on the gravel, growing smaller as Boyd accelerated into the distance. Clyde clicked to a second file. "Mini drone," he explained. "I launched it when you left the cemetery. Aerial view. This footage showed the entire scene from above. The rental car, me standing on the shoulder, and 400 meters back, Clyde's Peterbilt semi positioned like a guardian angel. Perfect witness distance. Close enough to intervene if necessary, far enough to remain undetected. "Martin Ashford is waiting for your call." Clyde said, handing me a burner phone. And I've recorded everything since mile marker 57. Time-stamped, geotagged, backed up to 3 separate cloud servers. I stared at the laptop screen, at my son's face frozen in the frame, mouth open, mid-sentence, ordering his father out of the car to die. Joyce taught me this early: never act on anger. Act when you have enough evidence. Is the footage enough? I asked. Clyde's expression didn't change. Felony elder abandonment. Maximum of 4 years plus financial abuse charges when we factor in the forged warehouse lease and the POA scheme. Add in Marlene's involvement and this becomes conspiracy. He closed the laptop. The cab fell quiet except for the air conditioning and the distant sound of highway traffic. We just need you to decide how far you want to take this. The question hung in the air-conditioned cab, mixing with the scent of diesel and coffee. How far was I willing to go against my own son, criminal prosecution, prison time, destroying his life the way he'd tried to destroy mine? I thought of Joyce's grave, of the inscription she'd chosen. She built things that last. I thought of Boyd standing over her headstone, impatient, checking his phone, saying those 4 words, "Mom is dead, Dad." I thought of the way he'd looked at me through the car window at mile marker 57, not with guilt or fear, but with cold calculation. All the way, I said quietly. I want to take this all the way. Clyde clicked through the footage with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd spent 20 years presenting evidence to juries. First, the truck grill camera, then the drone view, then the audio isolated and amplified until my son's voice filled the cab with perfect damning clarity. Wide-angle lens, Clyde said, pointing at the screen. Concealed in the chrome grille. Watch. Clyde pressed play. I watched myself climb out of that rental car, a 69-year-old man stepping into 108-degree heat because his son ordered him to. The wide-angle lens had captured Boyd's face clearly. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. The timestamp burned in the corner. 11:02 a.m. GPS coordinates locked to Highway 40 mile marker 57. Temperature 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Clyde isolated the audio. Boyd's voice, 3 words. When you're ready to sign, call me. Then the car pulling away. Then nothing but desert. Second angle, Clyde said, opening another file. The drone footage played. Aerial view from maybe 200 feet up, showing the entire scene from above. Boyd's rental car. Me standing on the shoulder. The car pulling away, accelerating, disappearing toward Pasadena. And 400 meters back, exactly measured in the overlay, Clyde's Peterbilt semi, positioned like a chess piece. You flew that drone parallel without him noticing? I asked. Launched it from the truck bed when you left the cemetery. Programmed flight path, autonomous tracking. I was monitoring from the cab, but didn't need to pilot manually. He closed the laptop. The geometry matters. 400 meters puts me close enough to intervene if you'd actually been in danger, far enough that your son never checked his mirrors and saw me sitting there. That's surveillance, not coincidence. I stared at the closed laptop, at the evidence contained inside it. 40 years in construction taught me to recognize good work when I saw it. Where do we go from here? I asked. Clyde started the engine. I drive you to Barstow Greyhound Station. You buy a ticket in cash, no digital trail, and take the bus back to L.A. Vernon Hewitt knows you're alive. Martin Ashford knows you're alive. Nobody else. Especially not your son. Boyd will call Vernon, I said. He'll check whether I've contacted anyone. Let him check. Clyde pulled onto the highway heading toward Barstow. Vernon knows what to say. The bus station smelled like every transition I'd ever made: diesel fuel, stale coffee, and the particular loneliness of choosing to walk away from what you can't fix. Clyde handed me $60 in cash. Round trip Barstow to L.A., 3.5 hours. Gets you to the terminal just after sunset. I took the bills. Thank you. Thank Martin Ashford, Clyde said. He's the one who hired me. I'm just the camera. The Greyhound bus was half empty when it pulled out at 2 p.m. I sat in the back row window seat watching the desert scroll past as the highway climbed toward the Tehachapi Mountains. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out Joyce's list. The same quarter-folded paper from that morning's coffee ritual. The same handwriting in blue ink. 7 items on the front. 7 instructions from a woman who'd seen patterns I'd missed. I flipped it over. The back was blank. I borrowed a pen from the seat pocket in front of me and began writing in careful block letters. Martin Ashford, revoke POA, establish irrevocable trust legal firewall. Vernon Hewitt, 18-month financial audit, asset documentation, timeline reconstruction. Clyde Barton, video evidence, drone footage, GPS verification, audio isolation. Each name connected to specific actions. Each action connected to specific assets. The 3-month strategy I'd been building since April 16th, now complete with its final piece of evidence. Every name, every asset, every required step. 40 years in business taught me never act on anger. Act when you have evidence. The bus climbed into the mountains. The temperature dropped. The desert gave way to brown hills, then to the outskirts of Los Angeles, sprawling toward the horizon. My phone buzzed. Text from Vernon Hewitt. He just called me. Asked if his dad had reached out. I told him no. I typed back, what did he say? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Vernon. Asked if you'd called the office. Asked if you'd contacted Martin. I said no to everything. Told him I hadn't heard from you since yesterday. Another pause. Vernon. But you need to know he didn't sound worried. He's tracking whether you've made it back yet. I looked at the phone screen. At Vernon's words. My son wasn't wondering if I was safe. He was calculating whether I'd broken yet. The bus descended into the LA basin as the sun touched the western horizon. Orange light painted the downtown skyline. The familiar sprawl of the city I'd lived in for 43 years stretched in every direction. I looked down at Joyce's list. Her handwriting on one side, mine on the other. Her instructions about love and truth, my battle plan about evidence and justice. Item 7 on her side, don't let love blind you to the truth. 3 names on my side, Martin, Vernon, Clyde. The bus pulled into the terminal just after sunset. Passengers gathered their bags, shuffled toward the exit. I stayed in my seat, watching the city lights come on through the window. My phone buzzed again. Vernon. He didn't sound worried. He's tracking whether you've made it back yet. I folded Joyce's list and slipped it back into my shirt pocket. My son hadn't called to check if I was safe. He'd called to calculate whether the desert had done its work, whether his father had died on that highway, or broken enough to sign whatever Boyd put in front of him. I stood, collected my overnight bag, walked off the bus into the warm Los Angeles evening. It was time to call Martin Ashford and set the machinery of justice into motion. Martin Ashford's home office felt like a war room. At 8 o'clock Saturday night, law books lining the walls, Clyde's video evidence queued on the laptop, Vernon's financial files, stacked in neat columns, and 2 old men who'd spent 4 decades building things preparing to tear one down. Martin Ashford, 72, with silver hair and the measured calm of 48 years practicing estate law, sat across from me in the study where we'd planned Joyce's will 5 years ago. Now we were planning to dismantle her son's life. 5 layers, Martin said, spreading documents across his mahogany desk. Each one reinforces the others. Each one creates a paper trail that becomes evidence. He placed the first document in front of me. Layer 1, we revoke the POA immediately. Notarized Monday morning, dispatched to 7 financial institutions via certified mail fax and encrypted email simultaneously. How long until they process it? I asked. Martin's expression didn't change. 8 business days, maybe 9. Legacy banking systems don't update instantly. Some still require manual entry, so Boyd can still access everything for 8 days. Yes. Martin tapped the POA document. But every transaction he makes during that window becomes indelible digital evidence of intent. We're not just cutting him off, we're letting him hang himself with his own greed. Layer 2, a thick folder labeled Irrevocable Trust. We established this in Joyce's name, transfers primary assets beyond reach of any POA legitimate or forged, takes effect the moment we file. Layer 3 Adult Protective Services Report. This triggers mandatory state investigation. They're required by law to initiate an investigation promptly within 24 hours for emergency cases with documented physical danger. Layer 4 District Attorney Referral. Criminal prosecution for felony elder abandonment. Clyde's footage gives them everything they need. Layer 5 Share Protection Documentation. You still own controlling shares in Garrison Contracting. We execute board approval from remaining shareholders to block any sale attempts. Boyd can't liquidate what he doesn't control. I studied the timeline Martin had drawn. 7 financial institutions, 8 days minimum, 9 if we were unlucky. He could drain accounts during that window, I said. Martin nodded. He could try. But every withdrawal, every transfer, every swipe of a card creates digital evidence stamped with date and time. The more he takes while we're actively revoking his authority, the deeper he digs his own grave. 40 years of teaching consequences to teenagers never prepared me for this teaching the same lesson to my own son. When do we start? I asked. Martin checked his watch. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Vernon meets us at my office with the financial documentation. We'll need his testimony about the irregularities he's been tracking. How long has Vernon known? 18 months, Martin said quietly. He'll explain tomorrow. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after sleepless nights. I sat in Martin's conference room, different from his home office, this one all glass and chrome in a building that smelled like filtered air and expensive carpet. Vernon Hewitt walked in at 9:30 carrying a leather portfolio that looked like it weighed 20 pounds. Vernon Hewitt, 58, with bloodshot eyes and the posture of a man who'd been carrying a secret too long, set the portfolio on the conference table and looked at me with something between apology and relief. I didn't dare tell you earlier, Lyle, Vernon said, voice shaking slightly. He had someone watching me for 3 weeks. A man in a gray sedan parked across from my house. Same car outside the Pasadena branch. I knew if I spoke up too soon, he'd wipe the digital trail. Martin opened the portfolio. USB drives, printed spreadsheets, bank statements with yellow highlighter marking specific transactions. Walk us through it, Martin said. Vernon took a breath. 4 major unauthorized transactions, all executed using the POA he had you sign 2 years ago for medical emergencies. He laid out the first document. January. Warehouse lease for the Fontana facility. Market value rental should be $12,000 monthly. Boyd signed a lease at $7,000 to an LLC registered to Marlene. Your signature on the contract, but you never signed it. Martin examined the document. Forgery. 6 months before the desert. This was premeditated from the start. Vernon placed the second set of documents on the table. 3 separate cash withdrawals from the joint business account. February, April, June. Totaling $340,000. All authorized via POA, all withdrawn as operational expenses that never appeared in operational ledgers. Third document. Ghost maintenance contract. $280,000 paid over 4 months to a vendor that doesn't exist. Invoices fabricated. Services never rendered. Money transferred to an account I traced to a shell company in Nevada. Nevada, I said quietly. Dexter Kingsley. Vernon nodded. The debt he mentioned on the phone. He was paying Kingsley with your money, trying to cover a failed real estate investment. Martin was writing notes in rapid shorthand. Total. Vernon laid out the final tally, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. $1.2 million, already gone. This isn't a plan, Lyle. This is a completed crime. $1.2 million. The number sat in my chest like a stone. Martin set his pen down with the deliberate precision of a man delivering a verdict. 1.2 million combined with the elder abandonment footage. This is no longer a civil dispute, Lyle. This is a criminal jacket. Felony financial abuse. Felony elder abandonment. The question is, how far do you want to push this? I looked at the files spread across the table. My son's crimes documented in Vernon's handwriting, captured in Clyde's footage, itemized in 18 months of theft. Before I could answer, Martin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Clyde. He says he has something on Marlene we need to see. Clyde arrived at Martin's office Sunday afternoon, carrying a manila folder marked Confidential Subject, Marlene Lockwood Garrison, and the expression of a detective who'd just uncovered something that changed the entire case. He spread the contents across Martin's desk without preamble. Background check reports, employment records, SEC inquiry documents stamped with official seals. Birth name Serena Whitmore, Clyde said, tapping the first page. 38 years old. Worked at Goldman Sachs from 2015 to 2019. I leaned forward. Marlene worked at Goldman. She did. Until she was quietly terminated following an internal probe regarding unauthorized trading on client accounts. Clyde slid the termination letter across the desk. No criminal charges filed due to insufficient evidence. But the SEC opened a preliminary inquiry. Martin picked up the SEC document, reading through wire-rimmed glasses. They closed it. Same reason, insufficient evidence. She knew exactly how far to push without crossing into prosecutable territory. Legal name change. Clyde continued, producing a court filing dated 8 years ago, filed 1 week after her wedding to Boyd. Serena Whitmore became Marlene Garrison. Complete digital footprint erasure. If you search for Serena Whitmore in any public database, now you get minimal hits. She buried her past. How did you find this? I asked. Clyde's expression was grim. Fingerprint database. She applied to a small boutique bank in 2020 after Goldman, before whatever she's doing now. They required prints for the background check. The record stuck in the system. Once I had the prints, everything else unraveled. Martin set down the SEC document. She's a professional. She's a predator, Clyde corrected. This isn't her first time. The Goldman termination, the SEC inquiry, the immediate name change after marriage, she's done this before. And you weren't her first target. The words settled in the office like a physical weight. She married my son not because she loved him, but because she'd identified a target worth $42 million. Boyd doesn't know, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Clyde shook his head. I'd bet everything I own that she told him she was Marlene from day one. Clean slate. No Goldman, no SEC, no history. Just a financial analyst with a respectable resume who happened to meet your son at a seminar. Martin steepled his fingers. This changes the prosecution strategy. Boyd is a conspirator, but Marlene Serena, she's the architect. She has a pattern. She has prior conduct. She has exactly the kind of history that makes a jury understand this wasn't a family dispute that went wrong. This was calculated predation. I looked at the photograph clipped to the background check. My daughter-in-law, my son's wife for 8 years, the mother of my granddaughter, staring back at me from a Goldman Sachs employee ID with a different name and the same cold calculation in her eyes. We need to get Breyer out of that house, I said. Martin and Clyde exchanged a glance. Working on it, Martin said. But we need grounds for emergency custody. Right now, technically, there's no evidence of direct harm to the child. She's living with 2 people conspiring to commit felonies, I said. And if we move too fast, they'll know we're coming, Clyde said gently. We need a few more days. Those words sat in my chest like stones. A few more days. My granddaughter, 14 years old, living in a house with a serial predator, and the son who'd left me to die in the desert. I went home that evening, sat in my kitchen under the warm yellow lamp, stared at Joyce's coffee mug still sitting in the dish drainer where I'd left it Saturday morning before the anniversary trip. My phone vibrated at 9 p.m., unknown number. I answered. Hello? Grandpa! The voice was young, raspy, worn from crying. Breyer Garrison, 14, with a voice that cracked on every other word, was calling from an unknown number, a child who shouldn't have needed to hide from her own parents. Breyer, I said, gripping the phone. Sweetheart, are you okay? I know what Mom and Dad are doing. The words tumbled out fast like she'd been holding them too long. I've been overhearing them talk in their room for 2 months. About the money, about the papers, about leaving you in the desert. My throat tightened. Briar, I was too scared to tell you because Dad said if I opened my mouth, I'd be shipped off to boarding school in Arizona. He said it 3 times, Grandpa. 3 times like he was practicing what he'd say when he did it. I closed my eyes. 14 years old. 2 months of listening to her parents plan her grandfather's murder. Threatened with exile if she spoke. Is your dad home? I asked gently. He came home late today. He looked really angry. Mom's been on the phone all night. Briar, I need you to do something for me. Can you record what your parents say just when they're talking in their room or on the phone? Can you do that? Silence stretched across the line. 5 heartbeats. 10. Then so quietly I almost missed it. I already did, Grandpa. I've been doing it for 6 weeks. The words hit me like a physical thing. A 14-year-old child living in that house for 2 months with no one to protect her recording evidence because she had no other way to prove her reality. 6 weeks, I repeated, on my phone. I was scared they'd find it, so I backed everything up to a cloud account they don't know about. There's a lot, Grandpa. Hours. I pressed my palm against the kitchen table, feeling the solid wood under my hand grounding myself. You did exactly right, I said. You are so brave, Briar, so smart. And I promise you are not going to any boarding school. You're going to be safe. When? Her voice cracked. When can I leave? Soon, I said. Very soon. But I need those recordings. Can you send them to me? I'll send them tonight, Briar whispered. But Grandpa, I'm scared. Monday morning, Martin opened with the kind of statement that makes your blood run cold. Robert Hines called me 3 weeks ago. Boyd tried to sell your 35% stake in Garrison Lumber, and I didn't tell you because I thought I could handle it quietly. I set my coffee down carefully. The cup made no sound against the desk. How close did he get? Martin slid a folder across to me. Inside, I found emails between Martin and Robert Hines, the majority shareholder, who'd built his 65% stake from Joyce's father back in 1987, the same year we'd incorporated the lumber division. 3 weeks ago, Martin said, Boyd approached Hines about buying out your shares, used the POA as authorization. Hines grew suspicious because the approach felt rushed and the pricing seemed desperate, 30 cents on the dollar below market value. I read the emails. Hines's careful language, his polite stalling, his request to Martin, please handle this quietly. Don't want to get caught in family drama. He asked you not to tell me, I said. He did. And I agreed because I thought... Martin stopped. Started again. I thought if I could block it quietly, you wouldn't have to know your son was trying to steal from you. I was wrong. I kept reading. Boyd's attempted sale violated the shareholder agreement on 2 counts, no board approval, and bypassing the mandatory right of first refusal window that gave existing shareholders 30 days to match any outside offer. If Hines had been less cautious, Martin said, if he'd just signed the paperwork like Boyd expected, your business would be gone. The POA gave Boyd apparent authority. Only Hines's hesitation saved everything. I looked at the date on the first email. 3 weeks ago. While I'd been sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee from Joyce's mug, my son had been negotiating to liquidate the lumber business we'd built over 43 years. Hines will testify, I asked. Already agreed. And I've drafted an injunction blocking any sale attempts. We'll file it with the POA revocation. How many other people had known pieces of this conspiracy and said nothing? Thinking silence was kindness. There's something else, Martin said. He checked his watch. Sandra Ortega from Adult Protective Services is arriving in 20 minutes. The APS investigation was triggered over the weekend. I didn't file a report, I said. No, but 2 other people did. Sandra Ortega arrived at 1:30 that afternoon, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s carrying a state-issued tablet and the calm authority of someone who'd seen every variation of elder abuse and knew exactly how the system worked. She sat across from Martin and me in his conference room and opened her file without preamble. 2 independent reports were filed within 12 hours of each other, Sandra said. First, a formal report from a private investigator named Clyde Barton submitted Saturday evening with attached video evidence. Second, a concerned citizen report from a gas station attendant in Ludlow who saw an elderly man walk into town from the desert, asking for directions, and called our hotline Sunday morning. I remembered the gas station, the cold water I'd bought, the attendant who'd looked at me with concern and asked if I needed help. Under California law, Sandra continued, receipt of credible elder abuse reports triggers a mandatory investigation. APS does not require the victim's consent to proceed. Martin leaned forward. What does mandatory mean in practical terms? It means whether Mr. Garrison chooses to press charges or not. The state of California will handle our end of things. We are moving forward parallel to any civil action you take. Sandra looked directly at me. This is no longer solely a family matter. The state has an interest in prosecuting elder abandonment and financial abuse. When will you contact my son? I asked. Sandra consulted her tablet. We will be making contact within 48 hours. Standard protocol for active investigations. Your son will be notified that an investigation has been opened and he'll be required to provide a statement. I checked my watch. Monday 3 p.m., 48 hours. Can we delay that? Martin asked. We're in the middle of strategic planning. No. Sandra's voice was firm but not unkind. The investigation timeline is set by state law, not by your preferences or tactical considerations. I understand you're pursuing civil remedies, but APS operates independently. We protect vulnerable adults. That's our mandate. The machinery of justice had started moving under its own momentum, and I was no longer driving it. What happens after you contact him? I asked. Sandra closed her tablet. He'll be informed of the investigation. He'll be asked to provide his version of events. If he refuses cooperation, or if the evidence meets prosecutorial standards, the case gets referred to the district attorney. Given what I've seen in the preliminary file video, evidence, GPS data, medical documentation of heat exposure, I'd say DA referral is likely. How long does all this take? Martin asked. Depends on cooperation. If everyone involved provides statements and evidence promptly, we can have a preliminary finding within 2 weeks. If people stonewall or lawyer up, it can stretch to months. She stood, extended her hand to me. Mr. Garrison, I want you to know what happened to you was a crime. Not a family dispute, not a misunderstanding. A crime. And the state of California takes these cases seriously. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm. 48 hours, I said. She nodded. 48 hours. Wednesday afternoon, your son will discover that the state has opened an investigation into his conduct. Sandra Ortega left. The conference room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on the San Marino streets. I checked my watch again. Monday 3 p.m. Wednesday 3 p.m. while Boyd was still waiting for my desperate phone call from the desert, still calculating whether I'd broken yet, the state of California would knock on his door with questions he couldn't answer. Monday night found me alone at my kitchen table with Clyde's surveillance logs spread before me like archaeological evidence of my son's planned crime, 3 months of movements, phone calls, credit card receipts, all leading to a single detail buried on page 47 that made my blood run cold. The desk lamp cast a circle of warm light across the pages. Outside, Pasadena was quiet. Inside, my coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept reading. Clyde's handwriting was precise. Dates, times, locations. Every movement Boyd had made since April 24th when I'd hired the investigation. 3 months of surveillance compressed into 93 pages of meticulous documentation. Page 47 stopped me. July 12th. 2023. Mojave Rose Motel Barstow. Reservation confirmed, one-night check-in, 3 p.m. Checkout, July 13th, 11 a.m. Credit card Boyd Garrison. Confirmation number BR-447293. I read it twice. Boyd had booked a motel room in Barstow for Saturday. 3 p.m. check-in. The same day he'd abandoned me at mile marker 57 at 11 a.m. I pulled out my phone and called Clyde. He answered on the second ring. "You found page 47. He booked a room," I said. "He did. I called the motel this morning to verify. They had the reservation. He never checked in." I sat back in my chair looking at the detail printed in Clyde's careful handwriting. He calculated I'd break before nightfall. "That's my read," Clyde said. "Leave you in the desert at 11 a.m. Wait for the desperate phone call, probably figured you'd crack by 2 or 3 p.m. Drive back from wherever he was waiting. Play the concerned son rescue you with performative worry. Check into the motel, wrap everything up cleanly over dinner. Get your signature on the POA documents that night or the next morning. Problem solved in one day." He'd scripted my breakdown like a director blocking a scene: panic by sunset, surrender by nightfall, resolution by breakfast. "But you never called," Clyde continued. "So he never checked in. Never executed the heroic rescue he'd planned. The entire script fell apart because the first line didn't go according to plan." I thanked Clyde and ended the call. The surveillance log sat open to page 47. The motel reservation stared back at me, evidence of a timeline that had existed only in my son's head. Abandonment at 11. Desperate call by 3. Rescue by 5. Signing by evening. Breakfast the next morning. Drive back to Pasadena with everything wrapped in a neat bow. Not a single line had gone according to script. My phone lit up on the table. Boyd's name appeared on the screen. I looked at the time. 9:47 p.m., Monday night. I let it ring 5 times. 6. The call went to voicemail. I picked up my phone and checked the call log. 12 calls since Saturday afternoon. The first one had come through at 2:30 p.m. Saturday, 3.5 hours after he'd left me in the desert. Right on schedule, according to his script. That first call had lasted 6 rings before going to voicemail. The second call, 4 p.m. Saturday, 5 rings. Third call, 6:15 p.m. Saturday, 7 rings. Fourth through 7th calls Sunday morning through afternoon. Each one lasting longer. The ring count climbing. 4 rings, 6, 8, 10. 8th call Monday morning. 15 rings before voicemail picked up. 9th through 11th Monday afternoon. Each one a full minute of ringing. 12th call just now, 9:47 p.m. Monday. No voicemails. Boyd hadn't left a single message because leaving a voicemail would mean acknowledging what he'd done. Just kept calling, kept waiting for me to answer and pretend none of it had happened. I thought about the progression. 40 years of teaching had shown me the same pattern in every entitled student who'd ever challenged a grade or demanded special treatment. First stage, anger. You're wrong and I'll prove it by force of will. Second stage, confusion. Why isn't this working the way it's supposed to? Third stage, desperation. Please, I need this. You have to help me. Boyd was tracking perfectly through the stages. Saturday's calls had been angry, short, impatient, expecting immediate response. Sunday's calls had shifted to confused, longer rings, more frequent attempts, the rhythm of someone who doesn't understand why the normal rules aren't working. Monday's calls had moved into desperate territory, letting the phone ring until voicemail cut it off, trying again within minutes, the behavior of someone who needs an answer and can't comprehend why it's not coming. I looked at the phone in my hand, at the missed call notification still glowing on the screen. 40 years in a classroom teaches you that some lessons require complete silence before understanding can begin. The students who learn fastest are the ones who sit with the discomfort of not knowing, who resist the urge to fill every silence with noise. Boyd had never learned to sit with silence. He'd always been the kid who talked through uncomfortable pauses, who demanded immediate answers, who couldn't tolerate the space between question and response. But silence was exactly what this lesson required. Silence, while APS prepared to knock on his door Wednesday afternoon. Silence while the banking systems processed the POA revocations. Silence while his wife Serena Whitmore, professional predator, calculated her own exit strategy. Silence while his 14-year-old daughter uploaded 6 weeks of recordings to a cloud server he didn't know existed. Silence while Vernon compiled 18 months of theft into a prosecutable case file. Silence while Martin drafted injunctions and protective orders. Silence while Clyde's footage played on loop in Sandra Ortega's office. Some lessons require complete silence before understanding can begin. And this lesson was just getting started. The phone buzzed again. Call number 13. I watched Boyd's name illuminate my kitchen table one more time. Watched the screen glow. Watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. 40 years of teaching had shown me that the most entitled students always follow the same progression. Anger first, then confusion, finally desperation. My son was right on schedule. I picked up the phone, looked at his name glowing on the screen for 5 full seconds, and set it face down on the table with the deliberate calm of a man who knows that silence is sometimes the loudest answer you can give. The ringing stopped. I returned to Clyde's surveillance log. Page 48, July 13th, Sunday. Tuesday morning would bring the first move in the legal war, and I needed to be ready to execute it with precision. Tuesday morning I watched the notary's stamp come down on the revocation of power of attorney, with the satisfying finality of a judge's gavel, one metal strike that legally severed my son's access to everything I'd spent 40 years building. The notary office sat on the 12th floor of a downtown LA building that smelled like coffee and copy toner. Martin had chosen this location deliberately neutral ground, professional witnesses, time-stamped security footage of every signature. This takes immediate legal effect, Martin said, collecting the stamped documents. The moment that seal hit paper, the POA ceased to exist in legal terms. But the banks, I said, the banks need 8 business days. Martin slid the documents into 7 separate envelopes, each one addressed to a different financial institution. Wells Fargo Chase, Bank of America, U.S. Bank, Capital One, Charles Schwab, Fidelity. We're sending certified mail with tracking direct fax with confirmation and encrypted email with read receipts. Triple documentation. I watched him seal the envelopes. So for 8 days, Boyd can still try to access my accounts. Martin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Try, yes. Succeed, maybe. But every transaction he makes during that window becomes time-stamped evidence of criminal intent. Every swipe, every withdrawal, every transfer, all of it creates a digital record with IP addresses, location data, transaction codes. We're not just cutting him off, we're documenting his desperation. The setup was elegant. Boyd would spend a week attempting to access funds that were legally no longer his to touch, and every attempt would etch another line into the criminal case file. Legacy banking systems. Martin continued, loading the envelopes into his briefcase. They're not designed for instant updates. There are manual processes, verification steps, department approvals. Some institutions will update in 3 days. Others will take the full 8. But California law is clear. The revocation is effective immediately, regardless of institutional processing time. Any transaction he executes after 9:17 a.m. today is unauthorized. I checked my watch. 9:17 a.m., the exact moment the notary seal had hit paper. 40 years building the business teaches you timing, and this 8-day window would show Boyd exactly what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. After the notary appointment, I drove to the Wells Fargo branch in Pasadena, the same branch where Joyce and I had opened our first joint account in 1981. The same teller windows, the same marble floors, different faces behind the glass. I reset the PINs on every personal account, changed the security questions, updated the contact phone numbers, added a second layer of protection that would trigger immediately independent of the POA revocation processing time. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia, whom I'd known for 15 years, processed everything without asking why. "All set, Mr. Garrison," she said, handing back my ID. "New PINs will be active within the hour." Tuesday afternoon found me back in Martin's San Marino office. The afternoon light came through the windows at an angle that reminded me of late summer warm, but already turning toward autumn. Martin spread a document across his desk. The header read, "Joyce Garrison Legacy Trust Irrevocable. 6 commercial real estate properties across Southern California," Martin said, reading from the deed. 2 warehouses in Fontana, the founding facilities where Garrison Lumber began. Your 35% corporate stake in the business itself. Total current valuation $27.4 million. I looked at the beneficiary line. Southern California Youth Apprenticeship Program, where Joyce served as a founding board advisor, Martin said. 5 years before her death, she believed true wealth meant equipping the next generation to build with their hands. I remembered those board meetings. Joyce sitting at conference tables with contractors and educators drafting curriculum for kids who wanted to learn trades. She'd never taken a salary, never wanted recognition. Just wanted to make sure someone was teaching the next generation what she and I had learned the hard way. "Once this trust is filed with the court," Martin explained, "it's a vault. No children, no creditors, no courts can crack it unless you personally walk before a judge and request dissolution. Your son tried to steal your fortune. Instead, he just guaranteed it goes to the people Joyce wanted to help most." Joyce's name in legal script anchored to a legacy that would teach kids to build with their hands long after we were both gone. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady as I signed. Martin witnessed the signature, stamped it, dated it, slid it into a leather folder. "Executed and funded tomorrow morning," he said. "Irrevocable the moment we transfer the first asset into it." I sat back in the chair feeling the weight of what we'd just done. The POA revoked. The trust established. Boyd's access to the visible fortune cut off, completely redirected toward the future Joyce had believed in. Martin snapped the trust document into its leather folder with the finality of a closing vault door. "Then there's the other matter," he said, pulling a separate file from his desk drawer. I looked up. Martin opened the file. Inside, I saw property appraisals, survey maps, deed records. "The 12 acres in Fontana," Martin said. "The land you and Joyce held under HRC Properties, LLC. Current valuation, $8.3 million. What are we doing with that?" I looked at the appraisal. The property sat on the eastern edge of Fontana, zoned for mixed commercial and industrial use. Joyce and I had bought it in 2010 with cash from a particularly good year, holding it under an LLC that bore her parents' initials, Helen Raymond, and Joyce's maiden name, Caldwell. HRC Properties, a quiet holding company that existed on paper but never appeared on the family ledger. Joyce had called it the Quiet One, the asset we never talked about, never leveraged, never touched. My son had tried to steal a fortune, without ever realizing he was looking at an incomplete map. "That asset," I said slowly, "becomes the key to protecting the one person in this family who still deserves protecting." The file Martin pulled from his drawer was labeled HRC Properties, LLC, Fontana Land Holdings. 3 initials that spelled out a secret Joyce and I had kept for 13 years, Helen Raymond Caldwell, a private nest egg she'd insisted we build completely off the family ledger. Martin spread the documents across his desk. Property surveys, tax records, appraisal reports. 12 acres in Fontana, Martin said, tracing the property lines on the survey map. Purchased in 2010 for $1.7 million cash. Held exclusively under HRC Properties, LLC, a private holding company that never appeared on any family business ledger. I looked at the aerial photograph. The land sat on the eastern edge of Fontana, bordered by industrial parks on 2 sides and undeveloped scrubland on the others. Zoned for mixed commercial and industrial use. "Current valuation?" I asked. Martin slid the appraisal across. $8.3 million. The commercial development boom in Fontana over the last 5 years tripled the value. I picked up the appraisal, remembering the conversation Joyce and I had in 2010. We'd just had the best year in Garrison Lumber's history. Cash reserves were higher than they'd ever been. And Joyce had said something that stuck with me. "We need one thing that stays quiet, Lyle," she'd told me over coffee in our kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd sat Monday night, reading Clyde's surveillance logs. "One thing nobody knows about. Not Boyd, not the accountants, not even Martin at first. Just you and me." "Why?" I'd asked. "Because someone will come for the money eventually," she'd said. "Maybe not in our lifetime. Maybe not Boyd. But someone will see $42 million and decide it belongs to them. When that happens, I want one vault they can't find." Joyce had known 13 years ago that someone would come for the money. She just hadn't known it would be her own son. We'd bought the land under her parents' initials. Helen and Raymond Caldwell had been dead for 15 years by then, but Joyce wanted their names on something permanent. HRC Properties, LLC. A holding company that existed on paper but operated in complete silence. Boyd's entire conspiracy, Martin said, targeted only the visible assets. He calculated liquidation value on everything he could see in the ledgers. The lumber business, the warehouses, the commercial properties. But he never knew this existed. I set down the appraisal. Because Joyce foresaw exactly this scenario. She built a vault he couldn't find. Martin nodded. "Your son tried to steal $42 million. He never realized he was looking at an incomplete map." I looked at the property survey, at Joyce's handwriting in the margin of the original purchase agreement. "For the future, for whoever needs protecting." "This one goes to Breyer," I said. "All of it, outside the legacy trust, separate protection." Martin made a note. "The entire parcel, 8.3 millions. Every acre. She's 14 years old living in a house with 2 people conspiring to commit felonies, recording evidence because she's too scared to speak up. She deserves protection. She deserves a future that doesn't depend on her parents." Martin drafted the documentation. A separate trust. Breyer Garrison as sole beneficiary. Accessible at age 25 or upon completion of accredited trade education, whichever came first. Joyce's legacy, protecting Joyce's granddaughter. I signed without hesitation. "Before I show you how the man whose debt drove my son to that desert became the witness who'd help convict him. Are you still with me?" comment. If you think he deserves redemption, or B, if you think he's just saving himself. Quick note, the next part includes fictionalized details to deepen the emotional impact. The lesson is what matters. Wednesday morning, I sat in a rented corporate conference room in downtown Los Angeles. The room was anonymous, beige walls, generic furniture, the kind of space designed to host meetings that nobody wants traced to specific addresses. Dexter Kingsley arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. 52 years old, operating in the gray zones of private lending, where legitimate finance shades into predatory practice. He wore an expensive suit and carried nothing. No briefcase, no files, no attorney. Martin had extended the invitation carefully. Not a summons, not a threat. Just a professional request for a conversation about mutual interests. Kingsley sat across from us. His expression was neutral, professionally blank. Martin slid a folder across the table. "The situation has changed since you extended that loan to Boyd Garrison." Kingsley opened the folder. Inside, Clyde's abandonment footage time-stamped and GPS verified. The APS investigation file. Vernon's 18-month financial audit documenting systematic theft. "Your $800,000 note," Martin said, "was the pressure point that drove Boyd to criminal action, elder abandonment, attempted murder, financial fraud." Kingsley studied the footage without expression. Watched my son order me out of the car. Watched the water bottles hit the dirt. Watched the rental car disappear into heat shimmer. You have a choice, Martin continued. Continue squeezing Boyd for payment and risk full-scale indictment for predatory lending, plus conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse. Or sign a cooperation agreement with the district attorney and pursue your debt through clean civil channels without criminal exposure. Kingsley set down the footage. What does cooperation require? Testimony about the loan terms, the timeline, Boyd's desperation level. Everything you observed about his financial state and decision-making. And you pursue the debt through normal civil court, no threats, no pressure, no criminal activity. Kingsley took less than 2 minutes to calculate the odds. He signed the cooperation agreement. The man whose greed had driven my son to abandon me in the desert had just become the witness who would help convict him. As Kingsley stood to leave, he paused at the conference room door. "Your boy has no idea what's hitting him, does he?" he asked. I thought about Boyd waiting for my desperate phone call, still calculating whether the desert had broken me. Unaware that in 18 hours, APS would knock on his door. Unaware that his wife was researching her own escape. Unaware that his creditor had just flipped to the prosecution. "Not yet," I said, "but he will." Kingsley nodded and left. Martin collected the signed cooperation agreement and filed it carefully. "Thursday morning," Martin said, "we need to have a full team meeting. You meet Clyde Vernon. There's something you need to tell them." I looked at him. "About April," Martin said quietly. "About when you really knew. About what you've been doing for 3 months while everyone thought you were just discovering this." I nodded slowly. Before the walls closed in completely, I needed to understand the full architecture of what my son had become. But first, I needed to explain to my team exactly how long I'd been building this trap. Thursday morning, Martin poured 4 fingers of bourbon at 10 a.m. and said the words I'd been waiting 3 months to hear. "When did you know?" We sat in his boardroom, Martin, Clyde Vernon, and me. Morning light came through the windows at an angle that cast long shadows across the conference table. In the center sat 3 months of accumulated evidence, Clyde's surveillance logs, Vernon's financial audits, the video footage that showed my son leaving me to die. Martin set the bourbon in front of me. The gesture was uncharacteristic. Martin didn't drink before noon. But this wasn't a normal Thursday. "April 16th, I said. That's when I knew. Vernon looked up from the files. Clyde's expression didn't change, but I saw recognition in his eyes. $47,000, I continued. 1 month, February to March. An accounting anomaly that doesn't happen by accident in a company I built nail by nail over 40 years. I watched Martin's face as the timeline clicked into place. "You called me April 24th, Clyde said quietly. 8 days later. "I did. Told you I needed a private investigator. Someone who could work quietly. Someone my son wouldn't recognize as surveillance." "You already suspected it was Boyd," Clyde said. "I knew it was Boyd. The pattern was too specific. The amounts were too calculated. Someone with POA access and detailed knowledge of company operations. Someone who thought they understood the business well enough to steal without leaving obvious traces." Vernon's hands were flat on the table. "You never told me. I couldn't. Not at first. Boyd had someone watching you for 3 weeks, gray sedan outside your house, same car near the Pasadena branch. If I'd brought you in too early, he would have known we were building a case." Martin leaned back in his chair. "The San Diego trip. Early June," I said. 6 weeks before the anniversary. I told everyone I was visiting suppliers. I wasn't. I was establishing alternate trust structures with a firm Boyd didn't know I used. Backup documentation. Legal firewall. "You knew the anniversary trip was a setup," Martin said. "I suspected. The timing was too convenient. Boyd suggesting we visit Joyce's grave together after 5 years of barely acknowledging her death. Renting a car instead of using his BMW, the route he insisted we take. I knew something was coming. "And you went anyway," Vernon said, his voice carrying something between awe and horror. "I went because I needed undeniable proof. Financial records can be disputed. Accounting anomalies can be explained away. But abandoning your 69-year-old father in 108-degree heat with $5 and 2 bottles of water, that's not ambiguous. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted murder with witnesses and cameras. 3 months. I'd known for 3 months. I kept Martin isolated initially, I continued. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed to protect him. If Boyd suspected Martin knew, he'd have changed his approach. Waited. Hidden evidence. I needed Boyd to feel safe enough to act. Martin picked up his bourbon but didn't drink it. How much did you know before Saturday? Everything Clyde could document. The forged warehouse lease. The cash withdrawals. The ghost maintenance contracts. Marlene's real identity as Serena Whitmore. The Kingsley debt. I knew Boyd was desperate. I knew he needed my signature on those POA documents. I knew the anniversary trip was his deadline. But you didn't know he'd leave you like that, Clyde said. I looked at the bourbon Martin had poured, at the condensation forming on the glass. No, I said quietly. I didn't think he'd leave me like that. 108 degrees, 2 bottles, $5. I didn't factor that in. I thought... My voice caught. I thought he'd threaten me, pressure me, maybe even physically intimidate me into signing. But I didn't think he'd actually drive away and leave me to die. The boardroom fell silent. I calculated the risk wrong, I said. I planned for evidence gathering. I planned for legal documentation. I planned for criminal prosecution. But I didn't plan for the level of cruelty my son was capable of. That was the miscalculation. My phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. I looked at the screen. Boyd. First call since the desert. 19 days. I pressed the speaker button and set the phone on the table. Dad, Boyd's voice filled the boardroom. Confident. Rehearsed. We need to talk about resolution. I've drafted terms that work for both of us. I looked at Martin, at Clyde, at Vernon. 3 men hearing my son's voice for the first time since he'd tried to kill me. I haven't heard from you in 19 days, I said, keeping my voice level. You left me in 108-degree heat with $5 and 2 bottles of water. And you want to talk terms? That was business, Dad. This is business, too. I'm offering to come back to Garrison Contracting. 60% equity transfer, you transition to advisory role. Clean exit for you, fresh leadership for the company. Everyone wins. Martin's jaw tightened. Vernon's hands curled into fists. When you drove away, I said slowly, and saw me in your rearview mirror, did it cross your mind that I might die? Silence on the line. 2 seconds. 3. You're tough, Dad. You're fine. 4 words. Delivered with the casual certainty of someone stating an obvious fact. No concern. No remorse. No acknowledgement that leaving a 69-year-old man in the desert might constitute attempted murder. I pressed the disconnect button. The boardroom sat in absolute silence. Boyd's voice had been confident, empty of anything resembling conscience or humanity. My son had framed near murder as a business negotiation and expected me to respond with gratitude for his generous offer. How does a man look at his son's number on a phone screen and feel nothing but tactical calculation? Martin broke the silence. What's the next move? I slid the Kingsley cooperation agreement across the table. We dismantle him. Every asset, every lie, every co-conspirator. Vernon leaned forward. Starting with... I looked at the team assembled around Martin's boardroom table. 3 months of planning. 3 months of evidence gathering. 3 months of watching my son dig his own grave while believing his father was too old and too trusting to see what was happening. Starting with Marlene, I said. She's the architect. She's done this before, and she's already planning her exit strategy. My 14-year-old granddaughter sat at my kitchen table Thursday afternoon, holding an old Samsung phone like evidence at trial. Briar Garrison had navigated the city, alone taken the 180 bus from her house in the valley to my place in Pasadena, told her mother she was spending the afternoon at her friend Emma's house, and arrived at my door with a phone and a secret that had been eating at her for 6 weeks. She placed the Samsung on the table. 14 recordings of Mom and Dad talking in their room. I was scared, so I started recording them on my phone. I backed them up to a cloud account. They don't know I have. I didn't know what else to do. Martin and I exchanged a glance. "Can we listen?" Martin asked gently. Briar nodded and opened the first file. June 3rd, 2023. Her mother's voice filled my kitchen. "Marlene. He's old. His mind is slipping. We signed the papers ourselves. He won't even remember." Boyd's voice muffled. "The POA covers it. Marlene. The POA covers everything. That's the point." The file ended. 12 seconds. Briar opened the second file. June 7th. Marlene discussing the warehouse lease. The third file, June 10th. Boyd on the phone with someone about the Kingsley debt. 4th through 13th files, conversations about liquidation timelines, asset valuations, how to handle the old man if he asked questions. Briar opened the 14th file. June 28th, 2023. The morning of the anniversary trip. Boyd's voice clear and distinct. "Highway 40-mile marker 57. Complete dead zone. Cell service dies at marker 49, doesn't pick up again until marker 65. 16 miles. 11 miles to Ludlow if he walks west. Marlene. And if he doesn't call, Boyd, he'll call 3 hours maximum. Heat does the work for us." The file ended. I looked at Briar. "You recorded this the morning of the trip." She nodded, eyes wide. Daddy was smiling when he said those numbers. I got scared. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew it was bad. Martin stood abruptly and walked to the back door. Stepped into the small garden. I watched him through the window, hands on his hips, head down, shoulders tight. He stayed there for a full minute. When he came back inside, his eyes were wet. "She's 14, Martin said, his voice rough. "She built the case we needed. A 14-year-old child living in that house alone with all of this. 14 files, 6 weeks, 14-year-old. Briar had compiled a prosecutable criminal record out of teenage fear, creating evidence of conspiracy, premeditation, and intent. She documented her parents planning her grandfather's murder, not because she fully understood the legal implications, but because recording was the only power she had to prove that what she was hearing was real. "You did exactly right," I told her, pulling her into a hug. "You are so brave, Briar, so smart, and you're safe now." "Can I stay here tonight?" she asked against my shoulder. "You can stay here every night," I said. After Briar fell asleep in the guest room, Joyce's old sewing room that still smelled faintly of lavender, Clyde arrived with his tablet. Martin and I sat at the kitchen table. The Samsung still sat between us, containing 6 weeks of evidence from a child who'd been living in a house with 2 people planning murder. Clyde opened his surveillance report. July 16th, 2 days ago, Marlene walked into Baxter & Cole, high-end firm in West Hollywood, white-collar defense and family law. She retained counsel, Martin said. $42,000 retainer, Clyde confirmed. "I have the payment receipt from my financial surveillance. She's preparing to file for divorce." I looked at the Samsung, at the recordings a 14-year-old had made because she was too terrified to do anything else. "She's going to flip," Martin said. "Already in progress," Clyde replied. "My contact at the DA's office confirms Baxter & Cole reached out yesterday about a cooperation proffer. Marlene's painting herself as the coerced spouse. Says Boyd orchestrated everything she went along out of fear she's willing to testify. Architect abandoning the foot soldier," Martin said. "Using the exact same predatory logic Boyd used on Lyle," Clyde added. "She sees the walls closing. She's cutting Boyd loose to save herself." I thought about Serena Whitmore, about the Goldman Sachs termination, about the SEC inquiry that closed due to insufficient evidence, about a woman who'd spent her career calculating exactly how far to push without crossing into prosecutable territory. How long does it take a wolf to recognize she's chained to a sinking ship? "Boyd doesn't know," I said. "Boyd has no idea. Clyde confirmed. He thinks his wife is on his side, thinks they're a team, thinks she's waiting for you to break so they can execute the final phase of their plan. Martin leaned back in his chair. She'll hit the DA before we file. We lose prosecutorial leverage. Let her, I said. Our evidence doesn't need her testimony. We have Clyde's footage. We have Vernon's financial audit. We have 14 recordings from a 14-year-old child documenting premeditated conspiracy. And when Boyd finds out his wife turned on him before his father did, that's its own justice. Clyde closed his tablet. Marlene's meeting the DA tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Boyd still thinks she's on his side. I looked at the Samsung on my table, at the recordings a child had made to survive her parents, at the evidence of a marriage built on predation collapsing into mutual betrayal. He'll find out by breakfast, I said. Clyde stood to leave. Martin gathered the files. Breyer slept in the guest room safe for the first time in 6 weeks. Tomorrow morning, Boyd's world would collapse. His wife would betray him to prosecutors. His father's legal machinery would activate. The evidence compiled by a 14-year-old child would begin its journey through the criminal justice system. And I would watch it all unfold with the calm of a man who'd spent 3 months building a trap that was finally, completely, irreversibly closing. The waiter returned Boyd's platinum Amex with the apologetic smile reserved for public humiliation. Saturday night, July 21st, 2023. 8 business days since the POA revocation had been notarized and dispatched to 7 financial institutions. The 8th day, the day Martin had predicted some systems would complete their processing. Boyd Garrison sat across from his wife at Morton's Steakhouse in Beverly Hills, projecting the kind of normalcy that comes from desperate hope. They'd ordered appetizers, wine, entrees. The bill sat on the table between them. The waiter cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, sir. This card was declined. Would you like to try another?" Boyd's jaw tightened. He handed over a second card. Chase Sapphire. The waiter returned 2 minutes later. "I'm sorry, sir." Marlene Garrison, 41, with the polished appearance of someone who'd spent her career in high-stakes finance, watched her husband with cold calculation rather than panic. She'd seen this coming. She'd been preparing for exactly this moment since July 16th, when she'd walked into Baxter & Cole and paid $42,000 for protection Boyd didn't know she'd purchased. "Try the business account," Marlene said, her voice low and controlled. Boyd's hand shook slightly as he handed over the third card. That was the business account. The waiter returned. Same apologetic smile, same quiet delivery. "Declined, sir. Perhaps you'd like to settle the bill with cash." Boyd pulled out his wallet, counted the bills. $63. The check was $147. Marlene opened her purse without a word and laid 8 20s on the table. They drove home in silence. Boyd's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The rental car, his BMW, had been repossessed 3 days ago, smelled like air freshener and failure. At home, Boyd went straight to his laptop. Online banking access denied. He tried the second account. Access denied. Third account. Fourth account. Access denied. Access denied. Declined. 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 All 4 accounts, Boyd said, his voice hollow. He froze everything. Marlene stood in the doorway. "Your father or my attorney?" Boyd looked up sharply. "What?" "Nothing." Marlene turned toward the bedroom. Boyd saw it then, the heavy manila envelope sitting on the floor just inside the front door. It must have been slipped underneath while they were at dinner. He picked it up. Brennan and Associates, Martin Ashford's law firm. His hands shook as he broke the wax seal. 12 pages. Legal letterhead. Vernon Hewitt's signature on page 6. Formal notice of civil deposition scheduled for July 28, 2023, regarding unauthorized financial transactions, breach of fiduciary duty, and elder financial abuse. 5 days away. Marlene appeared at the bedroom doorway with a suitcase. "What are you doing?" Boyd asked. "I'm taking Breyer to my sister's," Marlene said. Boyd checked his watch. Now it's 10 p.m. Now! She walked past him, opened Briar's bedroom door. The room was empty. The bed was made. Briar's backpack was gone. Where is she? Marlene asked, voice sharp. Boyd stared at the empty room. She said she was sleeping at Emma's house. When? Thursday. She took the bus. Marlene's face went very still. Then she grabbed her suitcase and walked out the front door. Her car started, backed out of the driveway, disappeared down the street. Boyd stood in the empty house holding the deposition notice, watching his wife's taillights fade. My phone buzzed for the 12th time that day. I sat in my living room in Pasadena, reading a book I'd already read twice, sipping tea that had gone cold, looking at Joyce's photograph on the mantel. The phone sat on the side table screen, lighting up every 40 minutes with my son's name. Call 12 became call 13, then 14, 15, 45 calls over 48 hours. I answered none of them. Friday night call 23. 23, I spoke to Joyce's photograph. He still thinks I'll answer. Thinks there's a price that buys forgiveness. Thinks silence means I haven't decided yet. Joyce's photograph didn't answer. But I knew what she'd say. The same thing she'd written on that list 5 years ago. Don't let love blind you to the truth. Saturday brought calls 24 through 36, each one lasting longer. The ring count climbing. My son sitting somewhere watching the phone ring and ring and ring, waiting for his father to break. I didn't break. 40 years in construction had taught me that walking away from the table delivers the heaviest blow. Silence says, what words can't you no longer have the right to my attention? Sunday night brought a text. July 22nd, 11:47 p.m. Dad, need to talk. Marlene hired own lawyer. She's telling things that aren't true. I read it. Set the phone face down on the table. Went to bed. How many times does a man call his father before he understands he no longer has one? Monday morning, Briar made pancakes in my kitchen. Her hands working the spatula with the quiet focus of a teenager who'd learned to find calm in small tasks. Is Daddy going to call again? She asked. Probably, I said. Are you going to answer? No. She flipped a pancake. Good. Martin arrived at 10 a.m. Sat at my kitchen table with coffee I'd brewed too strong. He stopped calling, Martin said. I looked at my phone. The last call had come through at 7:23 a.m., Tuesday morning. Call 45. Since then, silence. He finally heard the answer, I said. Martin slid a folder across the table. Vernon sent this over this morning. Deposition scheduled for July 28th. 5 days. I opened the folder. Saw my son's financial crimes laid out in 12 pages of legal documentation. Saw Vernon's signature attesting to 18 months of theft. Saw the questions Boyd would be required to answer under oath. He has no defense, Martin said. Briar's recordings document premeditation. Clyde's footage documents abandonment. Vernon's audit documents theft. The cooperation agreement with Kingsley documents motive. Every escape route is blocked. I closed the folder. And Marlene, I asked, meeting the DA again this morning. She's building her case that Boyd coerced her, painting herself as the victim. Let her, I said. The jury will see through it. Martin stood. Wednesday, you and Vernon need to prep for the deposition. 3 hours minimum. He'll have counsel by then, and they'll try to find cracks. There are no cracks, I said. Martin left. Briar ate pancakes at the table where her father used to sit 40 years ago. My phone sat silent on the counter. 45 calls. 48 hours. Then nothing. The manila envelope sat open on Boyd's desk, somewhere across town. 12 pages. Vernon's signature. Deposition scheduled for July 28th. 5 days to prepare for questions he couldn't answer. And Marlene's car hadn't come back. Clyde opens his laptop and says 4 words that rewrite intent. March 15th, 4 months prior. We're in my office, blinds drawn, the hum of the air conditioner. The only sound besides my pulse in my ear. It's July 24th, 2023. 3 days since Morton's. 2 days since Boyd's desperate text. One day until I sit across from the district attorney. Clyde turns the screen toward me. Browser history. Marlene's home laptop. March 15th, 2023. 4 months before Highway 40. 4 months before 108 degrees and 2 bottles of water. 4 months before my son drove away and left me to die. How to prove diminished capacity elderly California. I read aloud. The timestamp says 9:42 a.m. Keep going, Clyde says. 9:57 a.m. POA elderly parent dementia signs. 10:14 a.m. contesting irrevocable trust undue influence. 10:33 a.m. California elder abuse financial exploitation statute of limitations. My hands are steady. That surprises me. I've built 53 buildings. I've negotiated union strikes and survived 3 recessions. But watching my daughter-in-law research how to declare me incompetent 4 months before they left me in the desert, that should shake me. It doesn't, because I already knew she was the architect. Boyd's the hammer. Marlene's the blueprint. There's more, Clyde says. He scrolls. April 2nd. Attorney consultation diminished capacity trust California. April 9th. Hiring private investigator spouse California. She was looking into you and Boyd simultaneously. She wanted leverage on both of us. Correct. And on May 18th, he clicks to a new page. She searched desert survival rate elderly heat 110 degrees. March 15th. 4 months. Premeditated. The word sits in my chest like a stone. This wasn't desperation, wasn't impulse. Marlene spent 104 days planning how to eliminate me and control my assets. She researched my death the way I'd research a foundation pour. Can we authenticate this, I ask. Already done. Forensic image captured July 20th. Chain of custody is clean. Her MAC address, her login credentials, her ISP. It'll hold up. I close my eyes. See Marlene at Thanksgiving 2022 asking about my estate planning. Just want to make sure you're protected, Dad. She called me Dad. March 15th was 4 months later. We meet with the DA tomorrow, I say. What's our position? Clyde pulls out a folder. Marcus Webb. Assistant District Attorney, late 40s, 15-year career, 87% conviction rate on financial elder abuse cases. He's smart. Hates people who prey on seniors. I reached out yesterday. He's very interested. The Los Angeles County DA's office smells like burnt coffee and old carpet. Marcus Webb's handshake is firm, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looks like someone who reads case files at midnight and remembers every detail. Mr. Garrison, he says, I've reviewed the preliminary materials. What you've experienced is unconscionable. We sit. Clyde distributes 3 folders, one for Webb, one for Webb's paralegal, one for me. The evidence is surgical financial records, audio recordings, browser history, witness statements, geolocation data. Walk me through it, Webb says. I do. April 16th. The $47,000 anomaly. Hiring Clyde on the 24th. The ghost contract. The hidden Fontana land. San Diego on June 3rd for the backup trust. Highway 40 on June 28th. Breyer's recordings. Marlene's counsel. Boyd's desperate calls. We can prove intent means conspiracy and attempted murder, Webb says. His pen taps the desk. The browser history establishes premeditation. The recordings establish conspiracy. The geolocation data and your medical records from the clinic establish the attempt. This is ironclad. Then why do you hesitate? I ask. Webb leans back. Because you're here to negotiate, not prosecute. Smart man. I don't want my son in a cell, I say. I want him to live and learn. Webb's eyebrows rise. After what he did, he's 41. He made a choice influenced by a woman who's been manipulating him for 19 years. I'm not absolving him, but I know my son. Marlene researched my death in May. Boyd didn't even know about the financial discrepancies until she told him. That doesn't excuse abandonment. No, I agree, but it contextualizes it. Clyde slides a document across the table. Proposed resolution. Boyd accepts guilt. Suspended sentence contingent on 5 years supervised probation, 500 hours community service working with senior advocacy groups, and full restitution of $1.2 million paid over 60 months. First payment due within 30 days. Webb reads. His paralegal reads. They exchange a look. And Marlene, Webb asks. I meet his eyes. Excluded. She planned this in March. She researched my incompetence, my death, and my assets for 4 months before Boyd ever agreed to anything. She brought a 14-year-old child into a conspiracy to defraud and kill. She deserves everything the law allows. Webb's pen stops tapping. You're asking for restorative justice for your son and retributive justice for your daughter-in-law. I'm asking, I say, for consequences that match intent. Boyd's weak. Marlene's calculating. The law should recognize the difference. Webb looks at the browser history again. March 15th, May 18th. The searches for diminished capacity and desert survival rates. If Boyd accepts this deal, Webb says slowly, he testifies against Marlene. Everything. The planning, the execution, the recordings. He doesn't get mercy and silence. Understood. And if he refuses, then you prosecute both, fully. Webb closes the folder, looks at his paralegal, looks at me. I'll draw up the offer, he says. Boyd has 48 hours from receipt to accept. If he signs, Marlene faces trial alone. The recordings, the browser history, the financial records, all of it goes to a jury. And Mr. Garrison, I want you to understand she's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted. I nod. I know. We stand, shake hands. Clyde and I walk out into the July heat. My phone buzzes. Unknown number. I don't answer, because in 48 hours Boyd will have to choose his freedom or his wife. Mercy from his father, or loyalty to the woman who researched how long it takes a 69-year-old man to die in 108-degree heat. And Marlene's name doesn't appear anywhere on the immunity offer. Not once. Martin's voice on the phone carries the weight of federal involvement. FBI picked up James Whitfield this morning. I'm standing in my kitchen, coffee going cold on the counter. It's late July, 6 days since the DA meeting, and the walls are closing in on everyone who tried to bury me. Whitfield, I repeat. Boyd's cousin. By marriage, Martin says. Commercial real estate broker. Inland Empire. Marlene gave him up yesterday to leverage her own sentencing. And what she gave up changes the scope. I sit down. Explain. Marlene didn't just plan to take your assets. She planned to monetize them through Whitfield. He was positioned to purchase your liquidated properties at 30 cents on the dollar, flip them at market within 6 months, launder the profit margins through his brokerage. They had contracts drawn up, purchase agreements, escrow timelines, the Fontana land, the San Bernardino warehouse, the Riverside duplex I bought in 1998. All of it mapped, priced, queued for sale. They built an entire business model around my liquidation, I say, as if I were already in the dirt. Wire fraud, interstate conspiracy, Martin continues. FBI's involved now. This stopped being family law the moment Whitfield crossed state lines with purchase contracts. We're looking at federal charges. Marlene's cooperation bought her a reduced sentence recommendation, but Whitfield's looking at 8 to 12 years. I close my eyes. See James at Boyd's wedding 19 years ago, shaking my hand, telling me he admired what I'd built. 31 cents on the dollar. That's what my life's work was worth to him. How deep does this go, I ask. As deep as greed allows, Martin says. Whitfield had buyers lined up, silent partners. The Fontana land alone was set to net him $400,000 in profit within 90 days of your incapacitation. Incapacitation. That's the legal word for leaving a 69-year-old man in 108-degree heat with 2 bottles of water. Federal agents picked him up at his office this morning, Martin says. Marlene's playing every card she has, but it won't save her, just shifts some of the weight. I thank him. Hang up. Stare at the coffee. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me profitable. Boyd sees Clyde in the LA County Courthouse corridor on August 2nd. I'm not there, but Martin tells me later, and the security footage confirms it. Boyd's waiting outside courtroom 7 with his defense attorney when Clyde walks past briefcase in hand, heading to a deposition for another case. Boyd stands. Recognition floods his face. "You're the guy," he says. Clyde stops. "That day in the Mojave, you saved my father." Clyde looks at him for 3 seconds. No expression. Then he speaks, voice flat and factual. "I've been on your father's payroll for 3 months before that day ever happened. April 24th, 2023. Boyd's attorney touches his arm. Boyd doesn't move. "What?" "Private investigator," Clyde says. "Licensed, bonded, retained. Your father knew about the financial discrepancies on April 16th. He hired me 8 days later. I tracked every withdrawal, every meeting, every burner phone call between you and Marlene. I was 50 yards behind your truck on Highway 40. I had water coordinates and a satellite phone before you even turned the ignition off. 3 months, payroll, staged." Boyd's knees buckle. His attorney catches him. Clyde adjusts his briefcase. "Your father," Clyde says, "let you make the choice. He just made sure you couldn't live with the consequences unchecked." He walks away. Boyd stands in the corridor for 11 minutes, staring at nothing. The security footage timestamp runs, and my son's face ages a decade in real time. He knew. The whole time. He let me do it. That's what Boyd says to himself, according to his attorney, who tells Martin, who tells me. And yes, I did. August 4th. Martin's boardroom in San Marino. The room smells like leather and old wood sunlight cutting through the blinds in precise lines. Boyd sits across from me. First time since the Mojave. He's thinner, hollowed out. His hands shake when he sets them on the table. "I'm sorry, Dad," he says. His voice cracks on the second word. "For all of it." I look at him for a long minute. See the boy who built Lego towers on this same table 35 years ago. See the man who left me to die 41 days ago. Both true, both him. "I accept those words," I say. "But apology and trust are entirely different. One you hand me today. Other takes a lifetime to earn back." He nods, wipes his eyes. Martin slides the agreement across the mahogany. 5 pages. Single-spaced. Boyd's attorney has already reviewed it, but Boyd reads every line. 500 hours of community service with senior advocacy groups. $1,200,000 in restitution paid over 60 months. First payment due September worth $20,000. Suspended sentence contingent on full compliance. One violation and the deal collapses. "Sign at the bottom of page 4, Martin says. Boyd picks up the pen. His hand steadies. He signs his full name, Boyd Anthony Garrison. The ink is black, permanent. I watch my son sign away 5 years of his life to earn back what he tried to steal in one afternoon. Martin witnesses, slides the document into a folder. It's done. Boyd stands but lingers at the threshold, turns back. "Where's Briar?" he asks. I meet his eyes. "At my house," I say, "where she belongs." His face crumples. Not grief, relief. He nods once, doesn't ask for details, and walks out. The door clicks shut. Martin exhales. "That's the hardest thing you've done in this entire process," he says. "No," I say. "The hardest thing was letting him drive away in the first place." I think of Briar in my living room this morning, coloring at the coffee table where her father used to do homework 40 years ago. She asked if her daddy was coming home. I told her the truth someday if he earns it. Boyd's pen hovers over the signature line in my memory, then presses down. 500 hours, 60 payments. One narrow path back from the desert. Marlene's trial starts in October. Whitfield's in federal custody. Boyd has 27 days to make his first payment, and Briar has a grandfather who will make sure she never has to choose between loyalty and survival. The family court judge says the words that reshape a 14-year-old's future, Petition for temporary guardianship is granted. Judge Brennan, mid-50s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, looks over her reading glasses at Breyer sitting beside me in the LA County Family Court chambers. October sunlight filters through tall windows. Martin sits to my left, files stacked in front of him. The courtroom smells like old wood and institutional carpet. Given the criminal proceedings against both biological parents, Judge Brennan continues, and the child's documented role in evidence collection that led to those proceedings, this court finds both parents temporarily unfit to maintain custody. Petition granted temporary custody to paternal grandfather Lyle Garrison, with permanent review scheduled in 90 days. The gavel hits. One sharp crack. Breyer lets out a long, shuddering breath beside me. Not relief. Release. The sound of someone who'd been carrying a weight far too heavy for their age. I put my hand on her shoulder. She doesn't pull away. Do you understand what this means? Judge Brennan asks Breyer directly. Breyer nods, then finds her voice. I don't have to go back. Not unless the court determines it's safe and appropriate, the judge says. And that determination will prioritize your safety and well-being above all other considerations. Breyer turns to me, eyes wet. Really? You're coming home with me, I say, today and every day after. She nods again, wipes her face. 14-year-old, and she's already learned not to cry in public. I'm going to teach her it's safe now. Outside the chambers, Martin shakes my hand. His grip is firm. Congratulations, he says. This is the single most important contract I've secured in 3 months, I tell him. Breyer's already at the vending machine down the hall, counting quarters I gave her. Martin watches her, then looks back at me. The 90-day review is procedural, he says. Unless Boyd or Marlene object and can demonstrate material change in circumstances, Judge Brennan will make it permanent. And given Marlene's facing 8 to 12 years and Boyd's under supervised probation for 5, it's permanent, I finish. Martin nods. She's safe. One breath, 7 years, finally released. We walk to the parking garage. Breyer walks close beside me the entire way. She doesn't say anything until I unlock the truck. Boyd's 47th hour of community service falls on a Thursday in late October. I know this because I drive past the Pomona Trade Skills Center on my way to a meeting with the county assessor. I don't stop. Don't slow down. But I see his truck in the parking lot, and I know the terms of his probation require him to log 10 hours per week until the full 500 are complete. What I don't learn until Martin calls me 3 days later, is what happened during his midday break that Thursday. Boyd's sitting on a bench outside the welding workshop eating a sandwich from the vending machine when he notices a kid studying a booklet. 22, maybe 23, wearing a Pomona Trade Skills t-shirt and work boots that still have that new leather stiffness. The kid, his name is Caleb, I learn later is reading with the kind of focus you only see in people who actually want to learn. Highlighter in one hand, pen in the other, making notes in the margins. Boyd watches him for a minute, then asks what he's reading. Caleb holds it up. The cover is faded corners bent from years of handling. But the title is still clear, Building from Nothing, Practical Guide for Young Tradesmen. Lyle Garrison, 1998. Free distribution only. Boyd stops chewing. Where'd you get that? He asks. Caleb shrugs. Instructor gave it to me first week. Said it's better than half the textbooks they assign. Old man Garrison, he printed thousands of these every year, 98 to 2010. Sent them free to every trade school in Southern California. My instructor said he never wanted credit, just wanted kids to learn. Boyd sets his sandwich down, reaches out. Can I see it? Caleb hands it over. The pages are worn soft, annotated by previous readers. Diagrams of foundation, pores, framing techniques, load calculations. Tips on dealing with inspectors, negotiating with suppliers, managing your first crew. Everything I learned the hard way, written down so someone else wouldn't have to. Boyd flips to the inside cover. Handwritten in black ink, my writing from 25 years ago. To whoever needs this, you already have everything you need. Just start. That's... Boyd's voice breaks. He clears his throat, tries again. That's my father's handwriting. Caleb's eyes widen. You know, Mr. Garrison. Boyd stares at the booklet, at the diagrams I drew at my kitchen table in 1998 while he was upstairs doing homework. At the margins where I wrote encouragement to strangers, don't overthink it. Trust your measurements. Mistakes teach faster than perfection. Thousands of these. Every year. For 12 years. Printed at Kinko's, mailed to every trade school I could find. Never put my company name on them. Never asked for recognition. Just wanted kids who were starting out to have what I didn't, a guide that assumed they were capable. I watch my son hold a booklet I wrote before he graduated high school, before he stopped listening, before he learned to see me as obstacle instead of foundation. I thought I did, Boyd says finally, tears forming. I didn't. He hands the booklet back to Caleb with shaking hands. Stands. Walks to the bathroom. Stays there for 20 minutes. Caleb tells his instructor. The instructor calls the probation officer to confirm Boyd's still on site, not fleeing. The probation officer notes it in the log, subject emotionally affected after learning about familial connection to program materials. Remained compliant. No incident. Martin gets a copy of the log because he's monitoring Boyd's compliance. He calls me. Did you know he didn't know? Martin asks. About the manuals. Yes, I think about it. I stopped talking about my work around him when he was 16. He made it clear he wasn't interested. So no, I suppose he never knew. He knows now, Martin says. I hang up. Sit in my office. Look at the shelf where I keep one copy of each year's edition. 12 slim booklets. 12 years of hoping some kid would read page 47 about staying honest with subcontractors, or page 92 about treating your crew with dignity and build something good. Boyd sits on the trade school bench, holding the manual, thumbing through pages of diagrams and margin notes meant for strangers. Caleb walks back toward the workshop. Through the window, I'm not there, but I can see it in my mind, as clearly as if I were my son's shoulders shake. 41 years old, learning who his father was, from a 22-year-old apprentice holding a booklet I wrote before the world got complicated. Briar pulls a green envelope from my nightstand drawer and my wife's handwriting stops time. For Lyle. Open when you need to. We're sorting storage boxes in my bedroom on a gray November morning. Briar's been with me 3 weeks now, permanent custody granted without objection. She's organizing my closet with the precision of someone who survived chaos by creating order wherever she could. Grandma Joyce's writing, she says, holding the envelope up to the window light. It says to open when you need to. Do you need to now? I've known about that envelope for 5 years. Found it 2 weeks after Joyce died, tucked in her jewelry box with a note on top. Put this somewhere you'll see it. Open it when the time comes. You'll know. I put it in the nightstand. Looked at it every night. Never opened it. I think I do, I tell Briar. She hands it to me. The paper is thick, expensive. Joyce always bought good stationery. Said if you're going to say something worth remembering, use paper that lasts. I sit on the edge of the bed. Briar sits beside me, quiet. The seal breaks with a soft tear. Inside one page. Joyce's handwriting steady and clear. Dated April 2018. 5 years ago. 6 months before she died. My love, I read aloud. If you're reading this, Boyd has made a choice that hurt you. I don't know what it is, but I know our son, and I know you, and I know how this story can go. My throat tightens. I keep reading. If our son doesn't learn this from us, let life teach him. And when it does, be there to catch him, not to punish him. That's what fathers do, Lyle. You already know how. You caught me when I gambled our first mortgage payment on a bad investment in 1979. You caught Vernon when he crashed the forklift in 96 and thought you'd fire him. You catch people. It's what you do. Don't forget that when Boyd needs it most. I pause. Briar's watching me, eyes wide. You've always been better at mercy than justice, Joyce wrote. The world will handle the justice part. You handle the mercy. I love you. I trust you. And I know you'll do the right thing even when it costs you. Especially then. J. 5 years. Sealed. Waiting for exactly this. I hand the letter to Briar. She reads it slowly, lips moving slightly. When she finishes, she looks up at me. You did exactly what she wanted, she says. You caught him. She was smarter than both of us, I say. Briar folds the letter carefully, puts it back in the envelope, hands it to me. You should keep this somewhere you can see it. I put it in the top drawer of my dresser. Next to my watch and wedding ring. Joyce knew. 5 years before Highway 40, before Marlene's browser history, before any of it she knew. Martin calls that afternoon. Marlene took a straight guilty plea, he says. 18 months, $400,000 fine, permanent felony record. Her financial credentials are revoked. She'll never work in the field again. And Whitfield, federal custody. Wire fraud trial starts in January. Prosecutors are projecting 8 to 12 years. I lean back in my office chair. Look out the window at the yard where Briar's building something with scrap lumber Vernon dropped off yesterday. Boyd's payment 47 cleared this morning, Martin continues. 20,000 on time 11th month running. He's compliant. How many hours left on community service? 238. He'll finish by March. I thank Martin. Hang up. Watch Briar measure a board twice before cutting once. She's learning. Oh. Vernon retires on November 18th, 22 years to the day after I hired him. I meet him on the Garrison lumber showroom floor at closing time. The space smells like sawdust and oil, familiar as breathing. Vernon's cleaned out his office, boxed up 2 decades of paperwork and photos and coffee mugs that say things like, measure twice and safety third. Corinne's ready, he says. Corinne's 34, worked her way up from yard crew to operations manager in 7 years. Sharp Fair knows lumber better than most people twice her age. She'll run this place better than I did. I know, I say. Vernon looks around the showroom. At the displays, Joyce helped design in 2003. At the pricing board, I update every Monday. At the corner where we keep the free coffee and the sign that says, take what you need, give what you can. Joyce used to say, Vernon starts, then stops. Clears his throat. She used to say, Bill, you take care of bricks, Lyle walls. The thing that holds it together is the thing you can't see. She meant you boss. I shake his hand. He holds it a beat longer than necessary. You caught me in 96, he says quietly. Forklift. I thought I was done. You said machines break, people learn, come back Monday. I never forgot that. You earned it, I say. So did Boyd, Vernon says. The catching, I mean, not the forgiveness. That's different, that's yours to give. He picks up his last box, walks to his truck. 22 years ending with a turn signal and a wave. Vernon hands over keys the way you pass a baton, not dropping it, trusting the next runner already knows the route. I stand on the showroom floor alone. Lights humming overhead. Dust settling in the corners. Next week, Corinne gets the keys. Full ownership transfer. The business Joyce and I built in 1981 will have a new name on the deed. But today I stand here a few minutes longer. Look at the corner where Joyce used to sit during lunch, reading the trades and marking up supplier catalogs. Look at the loading dock where Vernon taught 3 generations of yard crew how to stack without crushing your fingers. Look at the office where I signed Boyd's first paycheck in 1999 when he worked summers and thought he might want to build things. My phone buzzes. Briar texting, dinner ready when you get home. I made spaghetti. Real kind, not from jar. I lock the showroom. Walk to my truck. Drive home to a 14-year-old who's learning that stability isn't something you hope for. It's something you build one day at a time with people who show up. Vernon's truck pulls out of the Garrison lumber lot for the last time, And I think about Joyce's letter about catching people, about the thing that holds walls together that you can't see. Next week, keys to Corinne. Today I stand here a few minutes longer. The heavy brass keys to the Fontana warehouse leave my palm and settle into Corinne's. Early December. The air sharp and cold for Southern California. We're standing in the cleared warehouse where Boyd and Marlene once planned to hide assets. The space is empty now, swept clean, ready for something Joyce predicted 15 years ago, but never lived to see. Trade apprenticeship program launches January 6th, Corinne says. She's holding the keys the way you hold something sacred. First cohort, 12 kids. Free tuition, free tools, free manuals. Everything you gave people over the years, we give them. I look around the warehouse. 20,000 square feet. High ceilings. Good light. Joyce stood right here in 2008, hand on my arm, looking at the empty space with that expression she got when she saw 10 moves ahead. She told me once, Corinne says best way to anchor a legacy is give it to those with nothing because they treat it with the highest respect. That's what this program is. I remember that conversation. Summer 2008. Joyce and Corinne at the lumberyard talking about expansion plans. I was focused on square footage and profit margins. Joyce was focused on something else entirely. She stood right here, I say, said someday this will be for something bigger. I thought she meant expansion, more storage, higher margins. She meant this, Corinne says. I nod. Look at the space where 12 kids will learn to frame walls and pour foundations and read blueprints. Where they'll get the manuals I wrote. Where they'll learn that building things is about more than construction. It's about creating something that outlasts you. Who's teaching, I ask. Caleb signed on as lead instructor, Corinne says. The kid from Pomona, 23 now, said he learned from your manual and wants to pass it forward. 23. The age I was when I poured my first foundation and thought I knew everything. The age when you still believe the world makes sense if you just work hard enough. Good choice, I say. Corinne pockets the keys. We shake hands. She drives away in the truck that used to be Vernon's, and I stand in the warehouse alone for a minute, listening to the echo. Joyce's voice clear, as if she's standing beside me. Someday, this will be for something bigger. That night, Briar reads Joyce's list aloud in the kitchen over hot chocolate. It's the original list, laminated now to preserve it. Joyce's handwriting in blue ink, dated March 1981. 10 things I know for sure, written across the top. Briar's been reading it every night for 2 weeks, memorizing each item like scripture. Number 1, trust your measurements, she reads. Number 2, cheap tools cost more than expensive ones. Number 3, listen to the people who work with their hands. Number 4, never sign anything you wouldn't want read in court. She pauses at number 7, looks up at me. Don't let love blind you to truth, she reads slowly. Then, will you teach me that one, Grandpa, so I don't make the same mistakes? I watch Briar's finger trace Joyce's handwriting on a list written before she was born, teaching lessons to a granddaughter she never met. I'll teach you, I say, but you're already ahead of most people. You know the question to ask. She nods, goes back to reading. Number 8. Keep your word even when it costs you. Number 9. Build things that last longer than you do. Number 10. The quietest people are usually the ones holding everything together. When she's done, she folds the list carefully, puts it back in the drawer where I keep Joyce's letter and wedding ring. Grandma Joyce was smart, she says. Smarter than all of us, I tell her. Next morning, I drive the old 2003 Ford F-150 through Pasadena in that early light when everything looks softer than it is. Past the old Pomona branch we closed in 2015. Past the cemetery, where Joyce rests under a simple stone that says, she built more than buildings. Past the Pomona Trade Skills Center where Boyd's truck is already in the parking lot, 3 hours before his shift starts. He's early now, always early. learning what I tried to teach him 20 years too late. The engine ticks as it cools when I pull into my driveway. Metal contracting heat, releasing everything, settling into the shape it was always meant to hold. Briar's waiting on the porch with a steaming mug. Hot chocolate. She's wearing Joyce's old cardigan, the gray one that's 3 sizes too big. I sit in the quiet cabin of the truck for a minute. This vehicle is older than my granddaughter. The odometer reads 247,000 miles. Every dent tells a story. The cracked windshield from 2009. The coffee stain on the passenger seat from 2011. The scratch on the door from moving lumber in 2016. 40 years ago, I rolled into Los Angeles with $800 and a toolbox. No one waiting. No house, no wife. No idea what I was building toward. Today, there's Briar on the porch, patient, present, safe. I don't know if I won the long game or lost it. Don't know if catching my son instead of destroying him was wisdom or weakness. Don't know if Joyce would be proud of how I handled it or disappointed I let it happen in the first place. But I know this, it's the quietest morning I've had in 5 years. No phone calls from accountants about missing money. No midnight strategy sessions with Martin. No surveillance footage to review. No depositions to prepare for. Just a 70-year-old man in an old truck, a granddaughter on the porch, and the sound of wind moving through the trees Joyce planted in 1985. I get out, walk to the porch. Briar hands me the mug. Corinne called, she says. Said to tell you the first cohort is full. 12 kids, 6-month waiting list for the next one. Good, I say. We sit on the porch steps. Drink hot chocolate. Watch the neighborhood wake up. Briar leans against my shoulder, and I think about Joyce standing in the Fontana warehouse in 2008, seeing 15 years into the future with perfect clarity. Someday this will be for something bigger, she said. She was right. She was always right. And to you listening to my story, remember this: the hardest lessons we learn are often the ones we have to teach ourselves. I made mistakes raising Boyd. I trusted when I should have verified. I assumed loyalty was automatic because we shared blood. Don't make my mistake, love your children, but don't let love blind you to truth. Joyce tried to tell me this years ago. The greatest gift you can give someone isn't freedom from consequences, it's the chance to learn from them. These grandpa stories aren't just about revenge. They're about mercy and justice coexisting. I caught my son instead of destroying him because that's what fathers do. God put me through this trial to show me that legacy isn't measured in assets. It's measured in people we help rebuild. That warehouse Boyd planned for theft now teaches 12 kids to build with their hands. These are the grandpa stories worth telling, turning betrayal into purpose. Briar reads Joyce's list, nightly learning lessons I wish I'd mastered sooner. If this story resonated with you, I'd be honored if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have handled this differently? Your perspective matters. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Dad's Revenge Stories. There are more lessons coming, and I want you here for them. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story were adjusted for storytelling purposes, but the lessons are real and the message is true.